been. I probably should have got some water before this, man. Some electrolytes in my body. I'm gonna wait for people to kind of come in the chat. I'm gonna interact with y'all in a second here. I know it's late. What's going on, family? Family. So I just did an interview with. Let's see. I want to make sure this is high enough. Perfect. I just did a podcast interview with my friend Ezekiel Azonwu on his podcast called We Need to Talk. I might reference it a little bit, the actual video here on this channel. Hopefully I'll be a little more useful with my words tonight. You know, what I've learned about myself is, I don't know if it's like my blood sugar or what, but some days I can speak very clearly and articulately, and my thoughts are very sharp, very poignant, very clear. It's very clear what I'm trying to say. And then other days, not so much. I'm learning that about myself. That's not always the case. And so I was hungry, very hungry when I went on Ezekiel's podcast. And I remember thinking like 30 minutes in, like, oh man, I probably should have ate some food. Not even 30 minutes in. It might have been like 10 minutes in. And I just started going around in circles, man. But what up, Treese? So I want to do a little reaction thing, kind of live interaction. That video just went live. And I've got to stop retreating. Every time I get negative feedback, I got to stop thinking, you know what, forget it. I don't ever want to do this again. I need to continue doing it. I think it'll be great for Christians and non-Christians to continue having conversations. And I keep getting some of the very similar. Let me pull up this YouTube channel. Yeah, y'all know how I get when I don't eat. I legit think I'm like pre-diabetic. I didn't know that was a phrase, but I told my doctor he said it was cool. I was like, hey, you know, every now and then my blood sugar I just feel light. Like all I want is like, I can only think about eating gummy bears. Like I have to have some kind of sugar or soda or something. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, oh man, it's a thing. And I just can't think straight. But let's pull this up. Let's see. Let's do this here. Split screen. What up, Ebenezer? Shaping the Culture podcast. The only other Christian podcast I have ever been on, because apparently people think I'm on a Christian podcast tour and I'm just going around on a whole bunch of Christian podcasts and sharing the hate of Jesus with everyone. like I don't know why they keep giving him a platform. I've done one interview. I've literally done one. All my other videos talking about leaving Christian faith have been on this channel and this channel alone. So let me just address a few things about this video here. One, I'll pull it up on the screen just real quick. Let's see. One, as you can see right here, the audio was not very good. I found that out after the fact with Ezekiel. Shout out to Ezekiel, because Ezekiel used to be not tech savvy at all, and he is really, really figuring it out. This is something I've been messing around with video and audio for years now, and I think I can make a pretty good setup. It sounds great, looks great, right? And I say that and I start having glitches. Boy, pride come before the fall. And so I told Ezekiel, I fixed all his problems. Well, not all his problems, but I helped try to alleviate a lot of the problems he was having with audio in this and previous episodes. So this episode is still going to be kind of messed up, but the audio for his episodes going forward, I think I figured out the issues that he's having with his audio. So that was tough. But let's look at some of the comments first before we watch some of the video. I want to see him and Jackie. I want to see him on Jackie and Preston's podcast. I bet they gonna fact check him like crazy. Everyone thinks like Jackie and Preston are like the final boss, or Preston in particular. They always say, man, he needs to debate Preston. Like, I don't want to debate anybody. I'm not looking to debate anyone. I've been in the comment section like I shouldn't be. I said, I welcome any fact checking from anyone. I'm in no ways trying to trick or defeat anyone. This is not a competition for me. It's simply being honest and curious. And I'm sure I can learn a lot from them, and I'm sure they can learn a lot from me. If I ever did another one of these podcasts, I really try to make it my posture that be confident in what you've been thinking through. You spent a lot of time in this, and you've been very genuine. You've been very diligent. So you should be confident. But hey, the beautiful thing about being agnostic and not knowing and truly being open to spiritual claims in the supernatural world, and it's like the beautiful thing about that is that if someone checks you on something and say, well, actually, that's not right, you were thinking about this wrong, and they prove me to be wrong, like, I don't really have a vested interest in being right in that regard. Like, y'all gotta remember, I was on the other side of this. I was a Christian trying to make it all sound correct. Like, I was on the other side, like, man, whatever holes there were, I was trying to plug it up. So to be on the other side of it, I wanted things to be true. So the comment section, they're not all bad, but even the live chat, I think it just kind of shows. I thought I went into this thinking that maybe speaking to Ezekiel, he's a genuine friend of mine, and I want people to see a non-combative conversation between people who don't believe the same things. One who was a Christian and no longer is, and one who is, such as my friend Ezekiel. And I think it should be good for Christians to continue seeing people. I think it's good. I mean, they may not see it as good. I think a lot of Christians want ex-Christians to be mad. I'm like, I'm not mad. It's kind of one of them things though, like when people are like, yo, why are you so mad? I'm like, well, I'm not mad. And you keep saying, why you mad? Why you mad? And then it's like, well, no, I'm mad because you keep saying I'm mad. You ever been in those situations? Like, why you got an attitude? I ain't got an attitude. Well, no, I like you got an attitude. I'm trying to tell you I don't have an attitude. Now I'm having an attitude because you keep saying I have an attitude. And I think I responded something like that. In one of these comment sections, this girl was like, yo, he's been rude, blah, 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 blah. I think her name, I think you pronounce it as Care. Oh, she just responded too. So I said, hey, Care, that's a dope name. And she had said earlier, she said, yeah, same with me. I was just reading comments yesterday and he's still keeping the same energy. Atheists who don't believe in God or long for God really don't be responding. Joe, I think, is not at peace and is trying to make fetch happen. I'm not sure what she means by that, by going so hard and talking about how he doesn't believe in Jesus. Anybody who watches my channel consistently, that has never been like, I'm not really. Let me prove to you why I don't believe in Jesus, and here's why you shouldn't. Y'all know that's never been my position. He was much nicer and sincere, so it seemed, when he believed in Jesus, quote unquote. I don't believe a true believer in Christ who loses their faith in Christ was ever actually saved. So there goes that, once saved, always saved vibe again. So this is what I responded. I said, let's see if I can put it on the screen here. I'm realizing the other one wasn't even on there. So I said, hey, Care, that's a dope name if that's your name. I'm not an atheist. I've never claimed to be one. So maybe that's why I'm responding. Yeah, I've tried to be nice to a lot of people, and I believe I succeeded in that. I genuinely believe I be nice. I do be nice. Even in the comments that seem very straightforward, people think I'm being rude. I really hear the tone of voice I'm responding to. Like right now, that's how I hear myself responding when I'm typing comments. This is the voice I hear myself responding in. But I get a lot of emotion and intention is lost in text. But so I try to over exaggerate that and say stuff like, hey, Care, that's a dope name. Let you know, hey, I'm totally disarmed. Like, I'm not coming for your neck. Just here to clear up some things. And so I said, I wish y'all could feel how careless Christians can be online. In person, Christians have largely been nothing but kind and loving to me. It's not an excuse, but when you get literally hundreds of comments from Christians all critiquing you, dismissing you, and sometimes purposely misunderstanding you and sharing info that is not true, it's upsetting and you want to defend yourself in an aggressive way. I'll admit that. Sometimes y'all don't get, sometimes I'm nice and sometimes I'm just going to return that energy. I'm sorry. But I also realize it isn't helpful. That's why I said it isn't helpful, though. So I'm trying to do better at that. I don't think I'll ever fully shy away from these kind of convos, though. I find them too interesting and important. Still navigating the best ways to go about that. Clearly, I made a typo. Let's edit that now. Best ways. Boom. Okay. And then another comment said, she replied, "Hey, Joseph, Carrie is really my name. It's pronounced Carrie." Oh, that's dope. "I was born in Liberia, West Africa, and I immigrated to the States in 2000. I see you've mentioned in this video that you're more agnostic, so I apologize for saying you're an atheist. Christians can be a hot mess online, even in person. They can be a hot, funky mess online. To this day, though, I have, as far as specifically concerning this topic of me leaving Christianity, I've yet to have anybody in person be jerks. Online is just really empowering. I appreciate your response to me and the honesty and how you've been made to feel. I'm just sad because you were such a voice in the Christian community. I remember some of your poetry, like Worth the Wait, I'm So Black Christian with Jamaica West, and so much more. Your Chase God webisodes. Wow, she was really locked in. Your vlogs about your house church, PIA. Also, she's saying, yo, I've been locked in. I don't remember word for word, but it spoke to me deeply. I know that was the past, but it blessed someone like me. And high key, I think many Christians who are commenting nasty things are lashing out and maybe just missing you. I was just about to say this. I'm so glad she's saying this. And again, doesn't make it right. Sometime last year, I commented on one of your videos and you ate me up and my feelings were hurt too. But I quickly got over it. Because you probably said some slick shit. I'm just going, come on now. Don't tell one side of the story because I don't just be slick to be slick. Y'all be getting slick and then I get slicker. Oh, why is this cutting out? Thankfully, I have a failsafe with my webcam in there. Oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening with these, right? Oh, I know what it is. I know exactly what it is. Okay. Maybe I'll just cut to this. Let me see it real quick. I'll cut to this camera for now, just to be on the safe side, until I figure something out real quick. Boom. But like I said, y'all be saying some slick stuff. I just say stuff slicker sometimes. And then I'm made to be the jerk and the rude one. But y'all be rude. I just be ruder. I come back. If you nice to me, I be nice back. If you rude to me, if you say some slicks. And sometimes, here's the problem though. Sometimes y'all be self-unaware, so y'all think y'all being nice. And it's really shade in a very Christian way. So, and I be picking up on that. So, okay. So anyways, it said, high key, I think many Christians who are commenting nasty things are lashing out because they miss you. And again, doesn't make it right. Sometimes last year, I commented on, okay, let me skip it. Okay. But I quickly got over it. I don't know. I just hope the best for whatever life has in store for you. This video was nice watching you and Ezekiel on the screen together. See what the Bible say. A soft word turns away wrath. I gave her a soft word. We now had a real dialogue and got to what was underneath that. And what I do believe is underneath a lot of this is genuine shade. Like some of y'all really are just ain't got the fruit of the spirit. Y'all don't have love in y'all. Y'all say y'all love Jesus, but y'all are just nasty people. Y'all are mean. And then there are other people who I think are like Carrie here, who are like, you know what it is? Like, I'm frustrated by this. I enjoyed it. I don't like that he did this. And that turns into, I don't know, it's just misexpressed in some way. But just let's be self-aware and just check that. And maybe understand the reason why. And I'm not perfect. I know, listen, we're all online. I really do try to do a great job of, y'all don't see it. A lot of stuff I just delete. So let's read some of the comments and then we'll watch some of the video, right? I think this is cool so you can kind of know what to expect. Somebody said, thanks for this, but I feel like he was all over the place in this discussion. It was very hard to follow. I watched it myself. She's not lying. I was all over the place. In my brain, it made sense. And here's what I don't like. This is why I'm making this video right now. This is why I feel like Christians, and I gave them fodder. I gave them exactly what some Christians want. They want me to sound confused. It's like, oh, because he sounds confusing, he must be confused. Dismiss him. It's not the case. In this setting, I realized that like there's an interviewer I'm having these. This is my first time doing it with a friend like this. I've done one with Shaping the Culture. He might still be here with Ebenezer. I think I did a much better job on that. Maybe I had just had food. So I think I did a much better job being very articulate about my responses. I was very slow to speak. I wasn't stumbling over my words. I just do better when I speak slower. When I try to speak fast, if y'all notice, it's almost a speech impediment. Like my teeth stay together and I just blur words together. And my brain is like thinking about 12 different responses. Like, okay, I want to say this answer, but I don't want it to be read this way. And I know what people over here are thinking. I know what people over here are thinking. So I've got 17 different people in my brain I'm trying to answer to. And then I'm responding in a way that tries to make sure that I'm not misunderstood. And then in the end, you get misunderstood. So here's the moral of the story is that you're going to be misunderstood regardless. Because if you try to answer in a way that makes sure everyone understands you, then you are going to be sounding confusing and all over the place, at least for me. And then on the other side, if you just be straightforward and just say, man, this is what I want to say, then they're still going to misunderstand you because it wasn't enough context. Like, well, you said, like, well, I know I said this, but context. And I realized that there's never going to be enough context. There's never going to be enough context for me to explain myself to anyone. So I just I've got to be okay with that. You got to be okay with it, Joe. Let's switch this camera again because this thing keeps cutting out and I'm not sure why. Okay. Praying God will reveal himself to him the only way he knows how. This broke my heart because I can see the hurt he's experiencing. Literally, Satan sucks. Why do y'all want me to be hurt so bad? I don't get where the hurt, I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes my sleep schedule be bad and I be having bags under my eyes and people say that like, see, that's Satan. It's really no winning. Like even when I'm my happiest, I remember one time I had went through a really long season of, as a Christian, I was going through a deep season of depression. And then I went through a season of like, I was genuine, not depression, but I was just overwhelmed. I went on the PIA tour. I was actually doing a whole poem about being depressed called Depression Is. And I was just exhausted from people. Man, when you're on tour and you're doing four cities a week, and then you go out and talk to people for the meet and greet after. And so you're talking to, 100 people every night. Maybe not 100, but you're talking to a lot of people, taking pictures. And maybe, yeah, between meet and greet, before and after, easily probably talk to up to 100 people every single night in 40-something cities. Man, you're like crashed out. So we had like a few month break before we went to London and I had not been around a lot of people. So at that point, I'm really charged up, like classic ambivert. Like when I haven't been around a lot of people for a while, I can be very like energetic and just like, I'm great. But when I've been around too many people for too long, you're just gonna get a very dry version of me. And so when I got to London, I felt like I was in the best mood ever. Like I was taking pictures with everybody and smiling and having more conversation than usual. I was being goofy. I just felt great. And then afterwards, Ezekiel came to me and was like, yeah, man, I got a complaint from the promoter saying that, you were being real standoffish to the audience. And you just weren't being very friendly. And he got it from like several people. And I was mad discouraged. I wasn't even upset. I was discouraged because I was like, dang, I felt like that was the best I could offer. I felt like I was great. I was genuinely in a good mood. I was excited to be in London. I genuinely was excited to be there and genuinely excited to reach out to people, especially because it wasn't a whole tour. So we only had to do one show. So I don't have to talk to 100 people 40 times in a row. It's just gonna be this one time in London. I'm in a new country. I hadn't been here in like a year. Like I was excited. And so to go through all that and still be people still saying that I was unfriendly, I was just like, man, I don't know what to do now. I don't know what to tell y'all now. I'm sorry. So anyways, here we go. Um, let's see. There's some more now. Okay, the positive ones are rolling in now. They weren't. It was a little lopsided at first, but now the more positive ones are coming in. But let me read one of these. It says he talks in upside down, inside out cursive, and maybe he always did, and I just never noticed. Either way, I need an interpreter because I just don't understand what he's saying. I also realized that I got to realize, audience, I'm bringing up terminologies and ideas that I don't think a lot of people have quick access to in their mind. Like, oh, I get what he's talking about. So that's the other problem too, is like, okay, I want to explain what I mean by these terms. I don't want to mansplain it to y'all, but I also don't want to assume that you know what I'm talking about. So that's all the things that are going through my brain, and I'm just all over the place. Dude said b-ball analogy was terrible. Oh, here's a funny one. And this is one I think Teresa responded to. Joseph is just angry at God because he asked for a wife and didn't get one when he wanted one. Skip the fact that he made millions and became very successful in his crafts, but God didn't give him what he wanted when he asked for it. So now he's an intellectual, etc. We don't need this conversation from him anymore because God isn't a genie. And if you read the scriptures, you will see that God will not give you everything you want when you want, because he will make you wait and kill your idols. He is an example of a lack of biblical discipleship and intellect. That's why it's dangerous when you receive blessings too fast. Delay gives you strength to remain. All his points have been debunked by many apologists, and he just needs to either believe and submit or don't. And basically I said in the comment section, like, one, I've never once, I don't think I've even talked publicly about saying I want God to give me a wife. I don't think I've ever actually, like, minus like the poems that talk about love, I've never like been saying like, hey, yo, I've been waiting on God to give me a wife. This HDMI is like tripping on me. I'm so glad I have two cameras right now though, so that's great. I've never like made that a thing. Even as a Christian, it just wasn't part of the brand. Like I wasn't like, dear future wifey, when God sends you to me, that kind of stuff made me cringe. So you know that wasn't me. I've never even, I don't remember talking much about wanting a wife. As a matter of fact, ironically, I got a large following off that Worth the Wait poem, but I had already made a bunch of different webisodes before that were talking about a lot of other things besides relationships and love and abstinence and stuff like that. It's just that people are more interested in those conversations and they got more views. And I began to intentionally not make content about Christian dating or love or whatever. Like, it was, if I could show you the timeline, I'd probably made like 1 or 2 videos like that a year, because I didn't want to be branded as the guy who has the Christian dating. I felt like I had more to offer. I was like, nah, man, I'm an intellectual. I'm smart. I can talk about more than just, what Christians need to be doing to find love. Like I didn't want to be that guy. There's a lot of guys out there and women out there who that's their brand. I intentionally avoided that. I did not want to be that guy. It's just that's what, if I did put it out, it got popular. So outside of that, I haven't talked about it much. And then also, I've never been a millionaire. So there's that. I've never made millions off the church. I've made a lot of money. I have made good money. I will say that. Selling merch was very good to me. Doing shows and stuff. Don't let anybody get it twisted that somehow people got to leave the church to make money. Trust me. There was money to be made in the church, but I was never a millionaire. So I don't, people just have no shame in it. It's one thing to be a liar. It's another thing to be a Christian and a liar. Like, disagree with me, but like stick to your morals though, dog. Like don't just make up lies. Like please disagree with me. Please push back. Please whatever. Don't lie. That's what's been most frustrating, I think. Is people just be lying. Like flat out lying. So anyways, let's see how
a piece of leather with air in the middle of it, bouncing around on wood floor by humans.
One, it was also difficult to follow me because the audio was just really bad.
And it going through a hoop for 48 minutes.
What are you talking about right here, Joe?
That's essentially maybe some more details, but essentially that's all it is. But clearly, we have an NBA Finals. So
Okay, so yeah, let me use this time to explain what I mean on certain points. Shall we? Okay.
I mean, I think our perspectives are different, right?
But our perspective of all
I'll try to
these
expound
different
on places that people, in places where people thought that I wasn't making a lot of sense, and I agree that in my brain and where I clearly know where I'm going at with these words. I can see how someone's just not following me. So, along with the audio issue. So, let me try to make sense of some of this stuff. All right.
we've had like a but that's kind of always been our
It started off real slow. We were just kind of bantering, and then I think we really get into it right around.
faith and the lack thereof on my smaller YouTube channel, Flax and Feelings.
Yeah.
And even on my Threads account. And what I've learned is that Christians oftentimes, their knee-jerk reaction is to disagree with me, and they don't even realize that I agree with you. Yeah,
Yes, and this is a classic example in the live chat. People were like listening to me, like, "Oh, it sounds like he's saying this." It sounds like they want to disagree with me, and they want to call me an atheist. They want to call me, and they like miss the fact that I actually agree. I be agreeing, like I see the good, and I be seeing like arguments against faith, and I also see arguments for faith. That is what it means to be an agnostic. Is I don't know, and I see both sides. So yeah, call me double-minded, sure, but y'all just be disagreeing because it don't sound the way your preacher be saying it.
it's not saying it in the same words that you're used to.
Right.
But I'm actually, the point that I was making, I was actually, when we say Subjectivity, says, man, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I love how an author I've just been recently obsessed with, Dale Allison Jr., he has this book called Historical Christ and the Theological Jesus. And he says in his book early on, he says, the unexamined Jesus is not worth having.
And examined Jesus is like, that's the brink of heresy.
But always, and I said, I said in one of my videos recently, I was like, man, you know what?
Okay, I've talked about this on my channel before, so I'm not going to try to replay stuff that y'all already know about from me on this channel.
People put that label on agnostic as if it's just sort of a way to get out of saying you're really just an atheist. I think that's sometimes how it's perceived, or you're just confused, or you've reached a point where you can't learn anymore. You're pretty sure you're atheist, but because it's a little intellectually arrogant to full on say, I don't know for a fact there's no God, you just say you're agnostic. And that's not true for you. That's not true for me. I am genuinely open to the idea that the natural world as we currently see it, or that modern science can explain it, is not all that there is. I'm not certain.
I think I'm pretty, I'm looking back on some of this. I feel like I'm speaking pretty straightforward. Y'all understand what I say by that, right? I believe that there is credence to the idea that the natural world is not all that there is. Skin, bones, dust, and earth I don't think that explains the whole story. Or should I say, I'm open to the idea that does not explain the whole story. I think there's good reason to be skeptical that explains the whole story. I genuinely believe that
this isn't all there is. I'm not certain that this is all there is. And I'm open to either one of those possibilities. Genuinely open to, I've already been open to the possibility that there is no God, there is no supernatural world, no supernatural realm. And yet, as life goes on, life happens, and you start to see the need for faith, the need for stories that transcend your own selfish life. And, you know, that could just come from evolution. Like you could say, oh yeah, that could be explained through evolutionary biology or anthropology or sociology. You just need religion and you just, fine, that could be the case. But then it still doesn't get you around the fact that one of the biggest critiques right now that I've been listening to about the quote unquote new atheist movement is that, you know, people like,
so far, I'm not speaking in circles, y'all. I don't know, man. I just got it. What that song say with it? I ain't speaking fast. You just listening slow. Hold on, man. Hold on now. Hold on. Let me.
Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris. Ironically, Ayana Hirsi Ali, who's now a Christian, who's a big atheist woman, who's very outspoken against radical Islam. She is now a Christian, which is a very interesting story in and of itself. One of the critiques of that new atheist movement has been that y'all did a great job tearing down religion and showing how it's all a bunch of BS and it's historically wrong, it's philosophically untenable, and it's morally reprehensible. Y'all done a great job tearing it down, and you have not done a great job of saying, okay, what fills the void of it? You've taken religion away, you've done away with it, you've killed God. What do we do now? What does humanity do?
Christians should be amening me at this point. I'm just gonna come out. Yes, okay. What's the problem so far?
Without faith, and I'm just in a position right now in my life where I do see the beauty and in some ways necessity of faith that doesn't get you.
Let me cut this AC
to
on
the point to
quick,
say, well, I'll just believe because I know it's very helpful. I don't think that lasts much either. Just to say that, well, you know, religion, particularly Christianity, has been really good for humanity, so why not believe it? Or the sort of Pascal's wager, the idea that, well, if there is a God, if there is no God and live like there is one, then you've lost nothing. And if you know, but if you live like there's no God, there is one.
Yeah.
So you kind of like, you know, hedge your bets. And I don't think that works because it's not genuine faith. It's not a saving faith, even according to the Christian. It's like, I'm just doing this because I'm kind of hedging my bets, just to make sure that if there is a God, I'm gonna live like, and it's not a very visceral, deep experience either to live like that. Because deep down, you know, it's all a bunch of malarkey. I guess it's a bunch of, it's not.
I'm not talking in circles right now, y'all. I'm sorry. Let me skip to a part where I feel like I really am. It's kind of hard to get where I'm trying to go. Because right now I'm like, nah, what's the problem? What's the problem?
It's not, and eventually that behavior and action towards faith will dissipate. It'll fade away. So it's not a lasting faith. And Christians would even say it's not.
What I'm saying here at this point is like, I was addressing the Pascal's wager idea. Like, well, why don't you just, like, if you think that Christianity is useful, then you should just do it because it's useful. Your life will be better. We know that your life will be better if you live like a Christian. And I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this too. I hate that a lot of people have been comparing me to Jordan Peterson lately. I don't listen to a lot of his stuff. And then I just recently watched a couple of his interviews in the past couple months, and I'm like, I can see how we overlap, but I don't like being lumped in with Jordan Peterson. But I do be getting where he's coming from sometimes. But the idea that Pascal's wager is a Pascal, I forget his full name now. He was a Christian philosopher that kind of put this argument up like, hey, if I believe in God and there is no God at the end of this life, I have nothing to lose. I lived my life and I didn't go to hell and nothing happened after. But if you live your life as if God doesn't exist and he does, then you've lost everything. You've lost out on eternal life. So if you're a betting man, it's better just to hedge your bets and just live like God exists. And I don't think that that's a great, as much as I'm interested in faith and how much I see it as good, and I'm actually open to that. And I talk about that in this interview too, about how, you have to, in order to believe, you have to have a deeply existential experience. And so having a wager like that to say, oh, as long as you just act like you believe, just believe. No one can make themselves believe something that they don't genuinely believe. It won't last very long. It won't have life-changing effects. You'll just do the things. It'll be a hobby. It'll be a lifestyle. You'll go to church, but it's not the type of faith that I'm interested in. One that is deeply captivating and all-encompassing and rapturous and compelling in a way that deeply changes your life at the core of you to where now you can't see life ever the same. Pascal's wager won't do that. And even from the Christian perspective, that's not a saving faith. Even Christians would say, oh yeah, like if you're just acting like you've saved, but you don't really have the Holy Spirit and you indwelling in you, and you're not actually in love with Jesus and following after Jesus and forsaking, it's going to be really hard to forsake sin and really hard to forsake idols if you don't truly love God. So that type of faith is not a saving faith. It's a dead faith. It won't come with very obvious works. So, and at this point in the conversation, people were still saying I'm talking in circles. I don't know what he's talking about. I'm like, you Christians should agree with this. I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking slower right now, so it makes more sense. But yeah.
By biblical term, not saving faith, because you don't actually believe it. You're just going through the motions because you're trying to hedge your bets. I don't think that works. And so I think there has to be a way, or not has to be a way, but I'm thinking through, okay, what does it look like to have faith in a way that is deeply intellectually honest, that is not reliant on gaps in science or gaps in history, always trying to look for, there's a lot of Christians will do this with, like, when there's huge critiques of the Bible, oftentimes that are very good, very, very, very good critiques against the credibility or historicity of certain parts of the Bible and so forth. They'll try to say, well, but it's possible. In a broad realm of possibilities,
Yo, it makes total sense to me. I can see how if you have a particular perspective of me and you want me to sound like I'm crazy, I can sound crazy here. But what I'm saying here is that a lot of Christians confuse faith and ignorance. Faith and ignorance are not the same thing. And that's what I've been trying to get at on this channel, in saying that simply having gaps in our knowledge about the world, about history, about science, about physics, whatever, is not the same as active faith. That is simply a gap in rationale. It's a gap in reasoning. It's a gap in knowledge. But a gap in knowledge does not equal faith. A type of faith, and by faith I mean a belief in something beyond the reason that has deeply changed your life, that has a hope and an expectation about the future that is unshakable, is not the same as having a gap in knowledge. You know what I feel like right now? I feel like Joe Biden the day after the debate. Like, Joe, you're talking clear right now. I don't know what you were talking about in that interview, but I get what you're saying now. Fair. But what I'm poking at for Christians is that saving faith, a deep, genuine, to me, an intellectually respectable faith as well, can't be one that always hinges on the gaps in human knowledge or ignorance of humans. It's always latching on to, like, well, when reason has cornered a particular area, whether it be through history, like, hey, we've learned this about the biblical documents. It's very reasonable to come to this conclusion. And then yet Christians will, when you get into apologetics, it's always this like, but unlikely, probably, but impossible, no. And that's what they're hinging on. Like, well, it's not impossible. It's not impossible to read this scripture this way and make it make sense and make sure that everything is breathed by God and all that. It's constantly hinging on the ignorance rather than saying, you know what? I don't have to put my faith and reason at odds. Maybe this is a fool's errand that I'm going down at some point, but that's the only way it will make sense for me. That's the only way that it will be deeply moving to me, is that you can be curious. And I know a lot of Christians will say, oh yeah, I love science, and science, I've read, there's nothing wrong. Somebody said it in the comment section, there's nothing wrong with science. And if anything, science proves God. But what they mean, not always, but oftentimes what Christians will mean by that is, I can believe science where it agrees with me, and where it doesn't agree with me, I can dismiss it as they don't know what they're talking about. And I've seen that example more often than the Christian who wants to live in the mystery of it and say, man, you know what? The Bible says this. Either they don't want to live in a mystery, or they're not willing to admit that the Bible be getting some stuff wrong sometimes. And that does not mean that God doesn't exist, or that even the particular God that the biblical authors were testifying about, it doesn't mean that that God doesn't exist. It just means that they can be wrong sometimes. But y'all, so that's all I'm trying to say here. Getting passionate. All right.
Can work this way, can interpret it this way, and they have to do all these mental gymnastics to try to make the Bible inerrant and infallible, rather than saying, okay, man, my thinking line, which I also used to have faith, man, it seems pretty clear that the way that I've been presented the Bible by a conservative mainstream.
This is, that point that I also make here. I've talked about this on channel before. Oftentimes people will be like, "Oh, you see, we too smart for your own good. You try and use intellect, and it takes faith." Where do you think the faith is housed? How do you think you come to faith but by learning something through the mind? It's not all faith. It's not all spiritual. There is an overlap. I'm not claiming to know how the overlap works, but the mind is involved in some way. I pressed Ezekiel on this later in I think it's in the second part of this. And I was like, hey, yo, he was like, oh, I just have, where the objectivity comes from is from the Bible. I don't have to use my mind for this. It's not my subjective intellect that tells me, it's the Bible is objective. I say, how did you come to conclude that the Bible is objectively true? But through your own subjective intellect. You can't escape it. And that's okay. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that subjectivity is inescapable. People accuse me of being a relativist as if they are not one themselves. I just believe it's inescapable, which is why I think existentialism right now, at least for now, I might change my mind later, but for now, that's the wave I'm on. I'm like, it is only through deep existential experience that you will come to any real deep conclusions about life, including the Christian. And many of y'all would agree with me on that, but you don't want to agree with me of what that implies, but you do agree with me sometimes, because you know that in order to, y'all ask me that question all the time. Well, did you have an experience with God? You can tell me about all but did you encounter the Holy Spirit? It's deeply subjective, and that's okay.
Mainstream evangelism is not intellectually honest. This is not an honest intellectual pursuit. That's not me dismissing the possibility of supernatural or dismissing the usefulness of faith, but these are real problems that don't go away very easily. So I had to find a way to be, if I were to ever come back to faith, as I've said before, is that it wouldn't be something that needs for Jesus to be God. It needs for Jesus to die a physical death on the cross, that needs for there to be a resurrection. I know it sounds a lot like this is a lot of Harrison. That needs for all of the Bible to be the inerrant word of God that was not impeded by the ancient opinions of men. I don't need all of that. I can take it for what it is, and how it is a lot of detail. We can talk about how it works out.
So what is your biggest problem? We're going to talk more personally after this. What is your biggest problem with, I don't even know how to pose this question. Let's just focus on Christianity. What's your biggest problem with Christianity? Is it the Bible? Is it the people? Or is it everything else that exists outside of it that seems to conflict with God or the Word?
Well, I'll just say, before I say what my biggest problem is with Christianity, I'll start with what my biggest praise and appreciation of Christianity, because for me, it's not so one-sided.
Daniel, you've been typing a lot of stuff in here. I'm sorry I have not been catching what you're saying. I just see a lot of scriptures. Why would the Bible be getting stuff wrong if it's God's wisdom and knowledge, which is truth and higher than human wisdom, such as science? Yeah, sure. Feels very circular reasoning. Like, why would the Bible be getting stuff wrong if it's God's wisdom? Well, how do you know it's God's wisdom? Because the Bible told me so. All right, well, there's a loop that I can't get out of. Cool. And if there's one thing to be an inerrancy card holder, is another thing to believe that the KJV is an inerrancy card holder, or the KJV is inerrant. Oh my gosh. KJV is bad, so there's that. I saw somebody try to send me a video trying to prove why the KJV. Having a conversation about whether or not the Bible is reliable is one conversation, and then a sub conversation about that is the KJV a reliable reflection of the manuscripts that the wide range of biblical manuscripts that we have access to? Is the KJV an accurate a reliable representation of that? Absolutely not. If you just like, because it makes stuff sound deeper, that's great. Because sometimes I love, man, that old English be sounding great, but to hold to KJV, no.
I think that humans are naturally storytellers. We need myth. We started, if you believe in evolution and that the world is older than just 6,000 years old, then 30 to 70,000 years ago, humans began making myths and stories and fiction.
Okay, this is where I think I really start not making sense to people. So he asked me, what do I not like about Christianity? What's my problem? And I start off by saying, well, let me tell you what I like about Christianity because I don't want it to be this thing. Oh yeah, this is what I've been wanting to get to. Let me bash Christianity. Let me just say, I have a deep reverence for Christianity. There's a lot of things that I like. Let me tell you one of the main things that I like about Christianity and why I'm even consider as some sort of framework to follow in life. Let me just say that.
And
so the point that I was making is that ultimately, maybe I was trying to be too deep with it to make my point. The point was, I like that Christianity is a deeply compelling story, and stories are important. And I was trying to show just how old stories are for Homo sapiens, which starts in the cognitive revolution 30 to 70,000 years ago, that's where we start seeing evidence that humans began being able to tell fiction. One of the huge differences between Homo sapiens and all other primates, because obviously other animals and particularly other primates can communicate. They know how to communicate, and they can communicate some pretty complex things as well. They cannot create fiction. They don't lie. They can't spread stories. They can't tell stories. At least we don't have evidence for right now. They can't tell stories about the trees and why they wave and why the rain falls at certain times and why the sun goes down and why it comes up. All these things that we have religious myths about, other primates don't have it. Even other humans, Neanderthals, and don't have it. It was only Homo sapiens that were able to do that. And that's huge. That gave us a huge advantage, but it didn't just give an advantage. It is deeply wired in us to be storytelling beings, which is why I brought up basketball. The reason why basketball even makes sense, the reason why we can even play sports and with such religious conviction, see Boston on a jersey, is because we love the narrative. We love being a part of the narrative that includes us and other people in the broader perspective. So at its core, basketball is literally, in a very natural sense, with no fiction or nothing, is a piece of leather with some air pumped into it, and humans bounce it on wooden floor that has lines painted on it, and then sometimes they throw it through a metal circle with a cotton net, and they just keep doing that for about 48 minutes. And then somebody will type numbers on an electronic board that shows what we call scores. But we know that to us, that's not, whoa, Joe, that's not basketball. Basketball is dunking on somebody, and basketball is life, somebody would say, right? Like basketball brings a city together. Basketball is worth working hard to be good at. And the NBA finals we've been waiting for it, and people will pay money and save and fly across the country to go watch 10 guys stand on a wooden floor and throw a leather ball around. So that was the point that I was trying to make, is that we're constantly looking for stories to involve ourselves into, and Christianity is one of those stories. Whether true or not, it is still a narrative of a story. It could be a false story or a true story. It is still a story. And I think that stories are deeply, deeply integral to human flourishing and happiness and fulfillment. If you have no story, if you have no narrative, one of I would say one of the reasons why a lot of people will have suicidal ideation, why I've had suicidal ideation, is when you start to question the narrative that you're involved in, or you question if there's any narrative at all, and you don't know how to deal with that that lack of narrative. You don't see yourself involved in a family narrative in a way that you want to be involved in a family narrative. You don't see yourself involved in the financial economic narrative of the country. These things can be very depressing, and it is narratives that may lead you to want to end yours. So narratives are deeply, deeply, deeply important. And that's the point that I was trying to make on this. Somebody said, isn't that a backhanded compliment to begin talking about fiction and creativity and narratives as an appreciation for Christianity, or am I missing your point? So I get how that can come off as a backhanded jab at Christians, and maybe that's how people were taking it too. I think somebody was like, "Oh, that basketball was a bad analogy. He's trying to compare Christianity to basketball," and I think that's just where I misunderstood in that. Like, I see it as a good thing. I'm not saying that as a negative thing. Like, I think narratives are the only important thing. At the end of the day, the story you tell yourself, the story your family tells themselves, the story that Black people tell themselves, the story that this country tells themselves, the story that humans across the globe tell themselves collectively is the most important thing. It's all we have. So it's not me trying to downplay Christianity. It's saying Christianity is up there with the most compelling stories for human existence. C.S. Lewis thought that fiction was more true than nonfiction. I've heard Peterson talk about it. I think that there's something to that, and that's what I'm on as well. There is something to be said that there is something in some ways more true about fiction than there is about nonfiction. That when I watch a movie that I know is fiction, but it moves me so deeply because I know it tells me something about reality that reality itself could not encapsulate in that way. Like, the story of Black Panther moves me in such a way that I know Black Panther's not real. I know Wakanda's not a real country in Africa. I know that they don't have all this technology and an invisible shield around an entire country. But there's something about the story of the Black Panther, about T'Challa, that tells me something about my own story in a way that I couldn't access simply by looking at the bare, cold facts of life. I need the story to help me make sense of the reality. So in that sense, yes, I agree. Fiction can be more real, more true than nonfiction. And clearly there is something about the Christian story, even if it is fiction, that is very compelling, and it speaks to the reality of people's real lived lives. And yeah, that I'll pause it there. Like, I think that, and I would even, let me just say this. I would even say that what I'm also trying to push back against is this idea that Christians need the Jesus narrative to be rationally true in every physical, natural, or supernatural and literal sense for it to be worth following. I question that idea that you need it to be that way, which is why the Gospel of Thomas is so interesting, because clearly the physical resurrection was not of much importance to Thomas. To the canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it was, but we don't even hear about the resurrection in the Gospel of Thomas. We don't hear about the story of Jesus, what he did, where he went, it was just what he said. That was more important. What he said about reality, what he said about the condition of humanity, and what he said about being able to be saved from this particular reality that you're in is more important than what he did in the reality. And I know that may sound like some esoteric BS to some people. You're just trying to sound deep and ain't really saying nothing. Hopefully I'm saying it in a way that is not me just trying to like sound smart, but something for you to really consider for your own life. And it may save you from having to let go of all of your faith. It may allow you to wrestle with the myth and the loose literalness of the Bible. Like, you already do it is kind of my point. And I even said this in the interview. I think it's in the second half as well. Christians already kind of do it. I just flip it. So for instance, take the resurrection, for example. I have it written on my dry erase board. It says, the resurrection never happened. The resurrection always happens. Even if the resurrection is literally false, it is so true about reality that things die, things go through very dark times, hellish times, full of death, and yet there can be life on the other side of that. What is false about that? There's nothing false about the resurrection in that regard. There's nothing false about that. Daniel said they are backhanded compliments he gives. He usually tries to make it out as positive and pure-hearted since he can't be seen doing the same thing he bashes Christians for, but he can't hide it. I think then if you hear all that I just said and still stand on that, then either you genuinely don't understand what I'm trying to say, or you are intentionally misrepresenting or intentionally trying to misunderstand what I'm saying. Because they're not backhanded compliments, because I know Christians who believe this way, and that they're full of faith and they're full of hope in the mystery, and they don't think like KJV onlyist. They don't think like inerrancy holders. So I'm open to the pushback. I just think that I don't see what's wrong. I see the beauty in seeing it that way. Let me just say that. All right.
They call out we as if I'm some sort of historian or violent.
If the resurrection is a lie, doesn't it make Jesus a liar? If the resurrection is a lie, if the resurrection is a lie, it doesn't make Jesus a liar. It would make his followers a liar, right? Like, because if he's actually dead, then he's not alive to tell the lie. So no, it wouldn't make Jesus a liar. But even if the resurrection didn't happen, I don't think that has to make the followers of Jesus liars. Again, I think I'm trying to, in this conversation, I'm trying to open up the range of options that you could have to have faith. And some people may say the options that I'm offering are pure heresy. It's leading people off a deep end, and fine, you can absolutely tune out. But if the resurrection didn't happen, that doesn't mean that the followers, the ones who started the rumors of the resurrection, didn't truly believe it. I mean, that's one of the ways that Christians, some liberal Christians and even non-Christians, make sense of what happened post Jesus' death, that they saw visions. And that's perfectly within normal human experience to have visions of dead loved ones, and it feel very visceral and real. And they're not lying, and they're trying to make sense of that. And so lying to me is not simply saying something that's not true. Lying to me is saying something that's not true, and you're fully aware that it's not true. So yeah. He said it would be resurrected. He might very well believe. I was reading this. I keep referencing his book, The Historical Christ and the Theological Jesus. It could be said that Jesus, let me not misquote anything. I don't want to misquote anything, so I won't step into that. But yeah, Jesus very well could believe that, like, I can't die. I'm not going to die, and then die. I think that's very well possible. It could also, the resurrection could be true in one sense and untrue in another sense, in the sense that, in some spiritual sense, Jesus can come back. There's that idea, more of a Gnostic idea, that he didn't come back in a very literal physical body, but he did come back, and as Dale Allison Jr. would say, Jesus, he says, I believe that the disciples saw Jesus and Jesus saw them. And that statement can be true without there being a physical resurrection. So there's my thoughts on that. All right, cool. Daniel said, what if Christians say if the resurrection wasn't real? What Christians say if the resurrection will, unless they're trying to play according to believers? Hypothetical, unbelievable. I don't know what you mean by that question. What I meant to say was like, so I say that the resurrection never happened. The resurrection always happens. The Christian will say in sermons, and you'll hear it on Easter and all that, is the resurrection happened and it always happens. So in some non-literal sense, there are resurrections happening. Is resurrection power? Or there's resurrection power continuing to happen, and it happens every day. God takes dead things and makes them alive. Christians have no problem with that concept, but the resurrection happened 2,000 years ago. It's not, Jesus is not literally dying and coming back from the grave every single day for 2,000 years. And yet you believe in some sense, resurrections always happen. So that's what I mean when there's a sort of the butterfly of that. On one side, you could say the resurrection didn't happen and it always happens. And the resurrection did happen and it always happens. So Christians already do have some sort of concept of extrapolating things that are not literally true, but still speak very much to the real lived experience. So you don't believe in absolute truth. And what do you mean? What do you mean by absolute truth? I know what I mean when I think of absolute truth. I've learned that Christians mean several different things when they say absolute truth. So let me just ask you to clarify what you mean by absolute truth. But I do believe that it is not only reasonable, but also quite common for us to look at life and find things that are not true to be, in one sense, to be very true in another sense. And I know that makes maybe Christians uncomfortable, but you already do it in some ways, is what I'm saying. Jesus appeared to 500 witnesses following his resurrection. We know that from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, sure. But how do we know that story is true? Paul tells that story, but Paul was not around when that happened. Paul is getting that story from someone else because, Paul wrote that chapter. He wrote 60 years later. So the Corinthian church that he's writing to, or not 60 years, I'm sorry, I think it was like 30 years later, 20 or 30 years later that 1 Corinthians was written. So 20 to 30 years after the supposed resurrection of Jesus, he writes and says that 500 people have saw him. How do we know that? It's been hearsay. So sure, maybe he did, maybe he didn't know that, but it wasn't Paul that saw the 500, that saw what the 500 saw. Paul saw Jesus in a non-physical sense, or at least, and he's unsure if it happened in the body or out of the body. He admits that himself. And the 500, I don't see how we conclude that the people that Paul is writing to at the Corinthian church had any idea who those 500 people were, because that happened 20 to 30 years before Paul wrote that. So yeah, sure, he said that 500 people saw it. Okay, people say things happen all the time. I don't know. I don't see how that's like a, slam dunk, but yeah, sure. So aside from his disciples, people saw him. Eyewitness testimonies are still extremely valid and used in court in the law today. Yeah, I've heard that argument as well. But yeah, they're valid, but they come with a caveat. They're not the best evidence. People misremember stuff all the time. That's why eyewitness testimonies come with context and come with yeah, sure, we still need the smoking gun. We have people that say they saw them, but people lie, or people see things that they thought they saw, but they didn't actually see it. People have, so yeah, eyewitnesses work, but let's not act like just because someone said it, that automatically makes it true, because there are also people who said they saw things that Muhammad did or whatever. Mother Mary, people say they saw Mother Mary. Do y'all believe that Mother Mary visits people? People said it, they saw it. There's eyewitnesses. We even have an event like that happened in, where was it? where there were multiple people. This was in recent history. This was like in the, what year was that? This was in the past like 20, 30 years, I believe, where they massive amounts of people said they were claiming that they saw Mother Mary in one location. And what do you do with that? Furthermore, I said you usually try to make out your backhanded comments are positive, pure-hearted, but that's not saying you always do. I don't care if you're saying usually. I don't usually. So there's that. I still think it's completely misrepresenting and intentionally misunderstanding me, because I don't try to give backhanded compliments. I don't have any reason to give a backhanded. I compliment Christianity where I feel like I need to compliment it. In another way, if I have a disagreement, if I have something to say about Christianity or Christians, I say it. I think I've proven that I'll do that. I have no problem saying, no, I don't think that's good, or I don't think that's true. So I don't see why I would need to make a backhanded compliment. You take it as backhanded, and I try to explain what I mean by it. And after that explanation, if you still are convinced that I'm trying to be backhanded, then either you genuinely misunderstand me or you're intentionally misunderstanding me. Either way, there's no point in continuing to try to persuade you. So anyways, let's keep going.
Evolutionary biologist myself, but in this, what they would call the cognitive revolution of humans, we began making myths and stories. And that has been an integral part of human society ever since. We would never be able to make nations and currency and religions and sports without narrative, without story. You don't just go to watch the NBA.
So yeah, I went down the basketball rabbit hole. I don't know. I already made my point. I don't know why I had to give the basketball example. So I can see where that lost people, but my point still stands.
Finals, because there's a basketball bouncing around wood floor and it goes to the rims. You're going to
okay, Daniel.
People have a jersey that says Boston. And what is Boston but a story that we believe that these lines, these imaginary lines, are not in the real world. Exactly to my point about what I praise about Christianity is that or
if God chooses to reveal himself to me, then he will. And you're right. It'll only be by deep existential experience. I agree. We agree on that.
Super real, what I would call the super real reality. Super reality is what I would call it. Because there's reality as we see it. And then there's something, as the Bible would suggest, that, yeah, there is reality. Money, homes, food, skin, flesh. And then there's a reality that supersedes that. It's a super reality that this God, super reality, breaks through into our common reality and is working to make things better immediately and over time. And there's a lot of other stories that are under that umbrella as well, but that's a very beautiful, compelling story, and it's done a lot of good for humanity. It's done a lot of bad.
I said it's a very beautiful story, and it's done a lot of good for humanity. I don't see what's wrong with that. I don't see what's wrong with that.
In humanity, and I think Jesus died, and he didn't stay dead. This is of God, the church, the Old Testament prophets. Now, as far as like what my biggest problem is, that's like asking what my favorite color is. It depends on the day. Depends on if you're talking about my favorite color of a car, or favorite color of shoes, or favorite color of an iPhone. So there's a lot of things that you critique. There's a lot of things that I would critique. There's a lot of things that I would praise about it too, and understand the usefulness and beauty of it. But there's a lot of things that I would critique. I don't. We can start kind of at the core of it, whether that be, we can talk about the Gospels, or talk about the resurrection. I think at the core of Christianity, the existence of God, the church.
So what I'm trying to say here, because there's people who say, man, I still don't know why he left Christianity. Because they think it's some linear thing, or like it's just one thing, like, oh, we just need to find the one thing that he disagrees with. I'm saying pick where you want to. You want to talk about Old Testament, you want to talk about resurrection, you want to talk about creation story, you want to talk about evolution versus creation, you want to talk about religious syncretism, you want to talk about the reliability of the Gospels. What angle do you want to go at it? I have many. So like I disagree with a lot of it. It's not one thing. Existential plays into that as well. So like, that's kind of the point I'm making here, is like, to ask me, what is the reason why you left? It's like, and then somebody was asking, what about when did you leave Christian? Like, when was the moment you knew? And there was some, pivotal moments in my life for sure. But one thing, for your own experience, Christian, that your journey with God or without God, that it's never linear. It's never linear. Your life looks like it could be you're spiraling up, or you can spiral down. It can be I'm moving forward and then I kind of go back, and then I go up and I go down, I go sideways and I go this way. It's a very 3D journey. It's never a 2D journey where you just start here and then you end here. You know that your life is in 3 dimensions with moments that move faster than others and moments that move slower and ones that move back. And, so I think that people are okay with coming to the idea that walking away from Christianity is, they want it to be a linear move. Like, they're okay with being in Christianity as not a linear thing. They understand that their walk and their sanctification with God is not linear. But when people are not in the church, they simplify it to a two-dimensional experience where it's just, you got point A, you got point B. How did you get from there to there? And it's never that simple. You know that for yourself. So if you assume that everyone else is having a human experience like you, then you got to understand that it's never really one thing. Like, oh, he left because God didn't give him money, or God didn't give him this, or God didn't. It's like, it's never one thing. We're multi-dimensional people. You know that. Empathy would tell you that, okay, I know my life is not one-dimensional, so I cannot assume that other people's lives are one-dimensional. That's my point. So you say, okay, you say you don't, I say you do. Yeah, and you're you're dishonest. So there's that. Be at peace, Joseph. And yes, we agree on scripture teaching. Our belief in God would be an essential move of God in giving it to you. Yeah, okay. Josh said, I feel like deep belief in anything quote unquote supernatural requires a high level of delusion. It depends on how you define delusion. I would agree in some sense that to have lack of faith in the supernatural requires some type of delusion as well. It will require that you act as if there is meaning to life when there's not. It require that you act as if humans have dignity when they don't inherently have dignity. So there's critique to be made both ways. We have to exist in some type of delusion. But even then, I wouldn't say that people who have supernatural experiences, some of them can be very delusional. And I don't think has to be the case that they're delusional. But again, it depends on how you define delusional.
The Old Testament prophets, Adam and Eve, end time revelation, all that stuff. Many Christians would make the argument in some way that all of that is almost irrelevant without the thing at the center of it, which is Jesus died and he didn't stay dead. Mm-hmm. That is the pinnacle of the Christian story. And I have many qualms around it that I'm kind of wrestling through right now. I've done a lot of, pontificating and thinking around the resurrection. I'm currently going through it's a long book with very, very small.
I still ain't through resurrection. That resurrection book is long, y'all. I've been reading that thing for a couple months now, just little bits at it at a time. And it's really like, it's a lot. It's not, parts of it is easy to read. Parts of it is like, you got to be really locked in. So I'm trying to finish it.
Allison Jr. called The Resurrection. Okay. And he is a really, really, really good scholar. I think he's a professor at Princeton University, well-respected, not just by non-Christians, but Christians themselves. And he's also one that I just mentioned earlier, he wrote The Historical Christ and Theological Jesus. And he has this book that's basically, he's a Christian himself, probably considered a liberal Christian. And he believes in a resurrection. He believes that, how he worded it is that, I believe that the disciples saw Jesus and Jesus saw them after he died on the cross. Mm-hmm. And his whole point of that book is that many apologists would try to argue that, well, if you just look at the facts objectively, look at the historical facts and what we know about the first century and about the New Testament, about the Gospels, the only logical, reasonable explanation for these events is that clearly Jesus rose from the grave. That's what you would normally hear from a Christian apologist. And then the other side would be, particularly from like an atheist or an agnostic atheist person, like my mind is really slow right now. Why is my mind blanking on this topic? So I haven't had my coffee today, but he wrote, Did Jesus Exist?
Oh, sorry. Y'all can't see the video. Sorry. I was actually reading the comment. Let me go right here.
He's a huge critic. Why is my blank? Cut this part.
Jesus didn't resurrect. This is just.
Let me skip past this because
whatever. Yeah, sure.
If Jesus didn't resurrect, I think justifiably the hoopla would have died with what would have been what we would consider the New Testament writers and people.
Why would have died?
Well.
Okay, so this point, what I believe Ezekiel's argument he's trying to make here is an argument I've heard a lot is that, well, if Jesus really didn't resurrect, then Christianity would not have made it off the ground. All the hoopla wouldn't have happened. so clearly something happened. And my kind of pushback is that that's one explanation, but there are other explanations as to why Christianity could blow up the way that it did. You don't need a resurrection to make sense of that.
Almost just like, okay, we gotta go from this place. It does not seem like, oh, he just died and he died a horrible death. Oh, we're about to fight like hell to make sure his legacy of death stays alive. Like what?
But why not?
But why?
Why would they do what? Why would they fight?
Why would they die for the fact that he died?
So, yeah, and then the argument goes, well, why would people die if they knew he didn't die? It's like, well, people can be genuinely convinced that they're dying for something that is real. It happens all the time. People die for, if you don't believe that Islam is real, people die for that all the time. So it's not, I don't think it's a very easy argument to make. Also, we also can't confirm that people were dying in mass for the resurrection or for the cause of Jesus. Like, that's sort of a thing that I just assumed to this argument I used to make as well, just thinking that people, that's what was happening in the first century. But in actuality, Christians weren't really like persecuted like that. Like, there wasn't some like sort of widespread persecution where people were just dying left and right for being a Christian. So it wasn't like guaranteed that you're going to die for having faith in Jesus. You gotta remember that old Rome is very polytheistic. And so, sure, you can have other gods. I mean, even the Jews had a different God than the Romans. So clearly that wasn't an issue for them to have another God. I don't see why Jesus rising from the grave makes it an issue. There might be the issue that, our God is supreme over yours. But that's not unique to Christianity, because you have the Jews that were already saying that there is only but one God. So why is it now that just because they claim that Jesus rose from the grave, it's now a theological reason to persecute Christians? They killed Jesus because he was a political threat, not because he was a theological threat. So them claiming that he resurrected, there's no political threat in that. So I'm not seeing the correlation in that.
Well, that's also a lot of Christians assume that the people who died, followers of Jesus.
So that's what I'm trying to say here.
Part goes, well, they knew he didn't actually rise from the grave.
I explained it. I don't have to. I'm gonna skip past this.
These apostles died brutal deaths specifically for faith in Jesus to sort of get off from it.
So I'll skip past this part. I agree. I was not very clear on my point when he asked me that. I was kind of all over the place. I didn't know my talking points. I didn't have any talking points. It's one of those things where you've read a lot on this subject but at the same time, it's like, oh, now I'm in the moment and I got to say this to somebody and I'm hungry. I got to say it in a clear and concise way that people understand from what point I'm trying to get to. It didn't go well. I admit that.
But that's not because of their faith per se, or that they kept saying that Jesus was risen from the grave. So it's not as, that language is not as cut and dry. That whole idea of like it would have fell to the ground, nothing would have happened. And there's a lot of assumptions that a lot of Christian apologists make that they put in their books and stuff. And then you actually go dive for yourself. And how do you know the apostles died? Because we just say, we know such and such died, such. It's like, okay, where in the historical documents, where in the historical data do we read that? What authors wrote about this?
Let me ask you this. Do you even truly believe that it's possible to come to a saving faith from getting the facts that you need?
No. Oh, no.
Boom, my main point. And people were already at my neck before this happened. Joe thinks that you got to have all the facts in order to have faith, and that's not what faith is. And I come here and say, no, I don't think that all the evidence in the world is going to get you to faith in Jesus. And I think that that's the problem with Christian apologetics. That Christian apologetics, really, at the end of the day, is not to convince other believers. It's to convince people who are already convince non-believers. It is to convince those who are already convinced that Jesus is real. They just need a little more assurance. They're kind of questioning, they need more assurance. But it is not. It is not for those who are not in the Christian faith. It will take more than just the facts. For anything, like, even if I did read about, it was very confirmed, like, man, there was a man named Jesus. He got crucified. He stopped breathing. And then 3 days later, he started breathing again. I still have to have faith in the theological implications of that. So the evidence in the history, the faith or the belief in the history of it, the belief in the facts don't get you to the theological implications. The theological implications are just that, implications, but they're not convictions. They're not necessities. They're not requirements. That comes from faith. And I think that comes from not just comes from choosing to intellectually embrace theological implications, but some deep existential experience, and maybe not an acute existential experience, meaning like one day I saw an angel come and then like, boom, that's an acute existential experience. Like you had this very one moment, like, oh my gosh, like, whoo, something happened, something spoke to me, I can't explain it. That's an acute, what I would call an acute existential experience. But then you have a more broad existential experience where maybe you've slowed down enough, and through meditation and through silence and pondering, begin to experience something that is transcendent to the now. That is also deeply existential. It doesn't have to be some loud, chaotic moment. I bring up this example with Elijah, where the presence of the Lord comes to Elijah, and he says he looked for him there was a great wind, but God was not in the wind. And then he looked for him in the fire, but God was not in the fire. And then there was a big earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. Then a still small voice came to him. And that's where God was. God was in the silence. So when I say deep existential, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the earthquakes and the fires and in the loud. It can be very much in the silent. And I think people approach that through meditation, ayahuasca, stuff like that. There are many ways, I think, to have an existential experience and that you may not necessarily be able to explain to someone else, and is extremely subjective. And I'm open to that.
If you got the evidences that secured based on, hey, this is confirmed by this written document, it's irrefutable, all this stuff, would that bring you to the place where you're like, well, I'm going to go ahead and believe I'm just one sound?
And that's my point. I sound very arrogant when I say this. Hopefully I'm making a disclaimer.
You know what, cancel, it's okay.
Hopefully making a disclaimer ahead will sort of prepare it so I don't sound as arrogant.
Okay.
But I'm starting to think that many Christians don't truly understand the implications of faith or what faith really is. For a lot of people, particularly those who are intellectual in this sort of conversation around history, philosophy, and stuff like that, apologists, it often comes off as if, well, if you just get enough facts right, the only logical conclusion is faith and the resurrection and faith in God and so forth. And
that's my qualm with the entire apologetic enterprise, is that it tries to make it seem like, oh, the only reason why you're rejecting the facts is because you don't want there to be a God, or you're like in opposition to God. But this really does logically make sense. And if you would allow the logic and the reason and the evidence, if you would follow it down the rabbit hole, you would find Jesus at the end of the trail. And it sells faith at a bargain price, as Soren Kierkegaard would say. It makes faith to simply be the result of the scientific method, the result of careful consideration of the evidence. It just makes it the next step. It's a 13th grade. You got high school, then you got the 13th grade. It's not quite college. You naturally go to the next grade. It's just what naturally comes after reasoning. And I don't think that's, if faith is anything, it's not that. That's my point.
I'm totally against that. I am these days, whether Christian or non-Christian, very much in a wave of like existentialism, that faith is something that is not, it's in its own world beyond rationalism and logic. And I know Christians would affirm that, but let me just even spell out even more. And I think Christians know this deep down. It's only when they start trying to hop into the intellectual conversations, they want to exist well. And I get it. Everyone wants, don't hear me saying that Christians are intellectual. Some of the smartest people I know.
Okay, y'all, I'm 34 minutes in and I don't see how I'm talking crazy. There's a couple of points where I kind of went on a tangent, but for the most part, I think I'm making sense. But again, it makes sense in my brain. Are y'all following this?
Is mystery. And I don't think Christians allow enough space for mystery. They confuse mystery with ignorance. And it's not the same thing. That you can just wallow in ignorance and it'd be okay.
And I get this part where I'm probably coming off a bit antagonistic. They confuse mystery with ignorance. And I don't ever want to come off as antagonistic. I never want to do that. And maybe that's what it comes off as, and that's what makes them shut off to what I'm actually saying. But I think it fits within the Christian worldview if you take it seriously. It's that faith is not simply the lack of knowledge. It is embracing one reality, but also realizing that there is a reality that supersedes that. And it's mysterious how those two things correlate to one another. But I don't validate the super reality of God, of supernatural, of the Bible, theological implications, Holy Spirit, all that. I don't invalidate that. Or should I say, I don't validate that. I don't validate the super reality by trying to invalidate the reality, the natural world. There's no need to invalidate it. It's just that one supersedes the other. One is the overlay on top of this. So there's the natural world with no stories, and we're just blood, flesh, and bones, and atoms, and that's it. And then on top of that is the story and the existence of some other world, the transcendent. And I don't think you need to invalidate what happens in the real world, what we know about as we're approaching, historical critiques of the Bible or philosophical claims or science and astrophysics and evolution. I don't think you have to actively keep trying to invalidate those things just so that you can uphold the super reality. Then it doesn't make it a super reality, because that super reality then only becomes dependent upon the gaps of what we know about reality. I don't think that's a very sustainable perspective.
Not deal seriously with critiques, or you have very pat answers for how you deal with real discrepancies in the Christian doctrines and the Bible history and all that. You kind of let yourself off the hook. What I mean by mystery is that you can acknowledge, it seems very, when you look at the data, and there may be some holes and some critiques to be made, but in general, we evolved. We have gone through millions of years.
Michael said, man, I've been following you since I was a teen, watching Chase God TV. Now I'm in seminary, but I have a lot of doubt and skepticism about my faith. I relate to your journey a lot. I feel you. Man, appreciate it, bro. And I'm not here to try to exacerbate anyone's skepticism. I'm not here to try to, I think sometimes I appreciate that comment for real, because I think sometimes Christians may see me as someone who's trying to be divisive, or who may find joy in making other people skeptical and making people stumble and stuff. Bro, I've been there, man. It's not fun, bro. It's not fun. Like, it's that existential crisis that comes with that, because all intellectual thoughts eventually have emotional consequences. So it's not just head up here. It has consequences in the heart and your emotions and how you see life and how you see yourself in the world. And I don't wish that dread on nobody, man. I don't wish that crisis on nobody. It may be necessary to go through, but I feel you in that. Like I do think in some sense, I wish it on you in the sense that I know that at some point, if you want to live a life that you feel is consistent and coherent within yourself, and you can be at peace in many ways, you've got to find a way to have a coherent view of the world and being honest with yourself. And I get the necessity of that journey, but it's difficult, man. It's hard. And you feel lost sometimes, you feel misunderstood, you feel like you can't talk to other people about it. They may not quite get how important it is to you. Like on one side, the Christians aren't feeling you, but then on the other side, the non-Christians don't get why it's that big of a deal. It's like, yeah, I'm doubting the resurrection. People are like, okay, yeah, it didn't happen. And you're like, no, this is a really big problem. This is huge. So I get it. I get it, bro. So man, blessings to you on that journey. And yeah, you said, how did you become brave enough to finally actually leave and live authentically? I don't know if it was bravery, to be honest with you. I think it's just, it felt necessary, you know. I think I've always been trying to live, and by authentically, I mean coherently, you know. I don't try to say authentically like as some virtue. I'm authentic, but more so I'm saying I'm trying to live in a way that I think is coherent. And we're all a little inconsistent, right? My homie Propaganda said that, man, we're all a little inconsistent anyway. So let's show each other some grace. I relate to that. Like, I'm by no means like the most consistent person. I set up my own standards and still violate them. It's an active everyday thing, trying to return to what you know or feel to be real. And so I don't know if it was bravery, outside of, you know, ironically, what really made me brave to be vulnerable to people started in the Christian church. So again, there's a lot of beauty, man. And I don't mean this as a backhanded compliment. You know, when I was in small group in church, when I started going to small group in Houston, to this day, man, I don't really know a lot of people who did small group like we did small group, man. And when I went to other cities, it wasn't quite the same, man. We had something special in Houston, and I was just with some dudes who I had never shared that way about my life with other men before. And that challenged my perception of masculinity as well, as around these really masculine men who also cried and shared their fears, and were it was just different. We were just very open about all of our struggles and sins and stuff. And it really made me realize that, oh man, everyone's jacked up. And it's really Jesus, you know, that was the perspective. And so even now, you know, obviously excluding the Christ part of it to some degree, you know, I found some freedom in seeing that other people are having a similar experience to me. And I think that it was very cathartic to do that in those moments, whatever I was holding in, whatever I was trying to hide and fake about, to finally be able to say it out loud was very freeing. It felt like my life was more consistent. It felt like what I do behind closed doors more easily matches up to what I do outside. And I'm still trying to do that. I'm not always perfect at it, you know. But for me, I could not really be you know, it's one thing to have doubts, but then once you kind of cross that threshold, we're like, well, this is not just doubts. I don't believe. I'm not going to sit here and fake with people. You know, I'm not going to lie and that's when you start grifting, right? That's when you start not drifting, but grifter. You become a grifter. You're out here scamming folks now. And I think there's a lot of people out there really scamming. Y'all, they not really own what they say they own, but it pays, man. So that just didn't sit well with me. That don't make me better than anybody. That's just how I'm wired. It didn't sit well with me. So, I knew that I made content from a real place as a Christian content creator early on. I made it from what I was really going through and what I really believed. And so for me to continue doing that and I'm not really feeling it, it's hard to do it. Not even on no moral stance, trying to be more virtuous than somebody. It's just like, it's hard. It's just hard to do it. It's hard to, like, my content was good because I really believed it. Like, and some people can make really good content and not believe that. That's just not how I'm wired. Like, I can make this content and it's convincing and it's compelling and it's interesting because I really believe this. But if I don't really believe this, then it's not going to be good. So that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at.
For the human species, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, and I believe in God. And I don't know.
Okay, let's get past this part.
Hold on. Wrong, and yet there's still space to believe.
And so I think like you say, leaving room for mystery, to me, is the only way that you can truly even have faith. I think
what we really need to listen to is the Spotify edition. Like, so there's a part 2. That was actually more interesting.
We understood everything perfectly and everything was just handed to us. God gave them manna daily for a reason. So I think the journey needs to be amplified. It needs to be taught. It needs to be a part of the way that we understand. It should be our theological framework. I don't like theological frameworks, to be honest. I think theological framework should be built along with the journey. I think that we need to walk in and adopt a theological framework and try to make sure everything fits in. I might not even hear it. But me and Joe literally almost came to blows.
Yes. Was that the first tour or the second tour?
It had to be it was the first one.
Oh yeah, me and Ezekiel almost got in a fight. He tried to punk me. He was like, "Step outside." He didn't think I was gonna step outside. We didn't fight, but I stepped outside.
Yeah. It was the first one. Yeah. I was to you or Chris.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to remember if me and Jeanette were super close. We're pretty close.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: the part 2 not gonna be. I'm gonna try to tell him to put it on YouTube, but the video cut out. Man, Ezekiel be having some real video struggles, man. So the reason why there's a part 1 and part 2, this was like a 2-hour conversation, maybe 2.5-hour conversation. But the camera battery died, and that's when I convinced him to get these dummy batteries where you can plug it up into the wall. But the battery died, so all we have is the audio. And he was like, "It don't feel right putting it on YouTube. I'm just gonna put it on Spotify as a part 2." So the battery died on my camera. So the camera that he was recording on, it was just showing him the whole time. And it wasn't showing me talking. So he felt like he would just put it on Spotify. But maybe people would still like to see that on YouTube. But we got into it with, let me pull this one up actually. You're not gonna be able to hear nothing.
Solomon. So let's just talk about, we're going to go from your journey into some things that I've been wanting to pick your brain about, okay? So you walked away from what we would call Christian faith as we know it. Mm-hmm. Well, originally when that happened, I was just like, oh, it got to be because, now I see him going into music. It's probably because he felt stifled because he couldn't be the artist that he wanted to be. So he wants to explore and just let his wings, spread his wings and get into music fully. And I don't think he feels like he can do that as a Christian. Is any of that true?
No, not at all.
I don't know why this is going so slow. I try to put it at 2 times the speed.
Bibles make money in the South.
Okay, something I've already talked about.
The space to walk this journey, because I'm saying that there should be some deconstruction. There should be some.
Oh, here we go.
So I can't even try to get you to do it. I just have to just.
Here we go. Let me back up just a little more.
I don't know very constant about it. And the covers, that's the other thing too. I wasn't going in the South, you go into Walmart and there's Bibles in there. And that's not a
okay,
just
start
a
here.
Religious stance. It's Bibles make money in the South.
Yeah.
Can I talk about how Trump made his presidential Bible or American Bible or something like that? And he's selling some Bible upcharging that joint. And because he understands
I was on a tangent here. I don't know what I'm talking about here. Let me fast forward. So I'm sorry, y'all. I don't know what I was talking about.
An announcement about that too on my YouTube channel saying I'm no longer going to be making explicitly Christian videos, and people assumed then that I wasn't a Christian. I still consider myself a Christian at that time. I was saying I really don't know where I'm at right now. I would be lying to y'all if I was sitting in front of y'all talking about like, yeah, you got to do this and you got to live like this and Jesus said this, and I'm not even really on that right now. I can't do it with any type of conviction. And
this is what I was just talking to y'all about.
Just from a purely monetary standpoint, from a content creating standpoint, like it has to be something that you actually care about doing eventually, and really love and passionate about. Okay. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Here we go.
Because that's what's so hard for people. It's just like, but you were so powerful. Some people said, you've changed my life. Let me ask you this question. Now that you're doing what you do and you love doing what you do, you're doing music and you're sharing your thoughts and your ideas, do you feel like you've somehow derailed from the impactfulness of purpose? Because
what do y'all feel, man? Have I derailed from my impact of purpose? Like, that's a question that was really interesting to me. It's like, now that you're not making Christian content, do you feel like, there was, you really heavily affected people's lives as a Christian? Like, I mean, people were, making some very serious decisions about their life based on what you said about Jesus. And so now, like, do you still feel like you have that same kind of impact?
Right? There's a difference between someone hearing you share what you share, the good news and the gospel and scripture, and their minds being transformed. And Joseph, like, you did something to me, and then something else where you killed that song. It was amazing. Like, that's dope.
Oh yeah.
Do you feel different?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's probably been one of the hardest parts of that transition, where I've always found identity in being able to say to people, hey, I'm going over there. come with me. This is where we're going. My poems did that. My songs did that. My YouTube videos say, hey, we're here. Let's go there. I'm directing you somewhere versus I'm here and I'm not really sure which direction to go to. What do you think?
That's where I'm at with it.
It's a massive shift in public identity for me and trying to figure that out. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy at all because meaning and purpose was such a huge part of what I did. And as a poet on the Poets in Autumn tour, or as a singer, as a YouTube video maker, as a speaker, so many people came to me and said, man, you changed my life through this versus, man, you made me feel good going through this. Now I get a lot of people who find a lot of meaning in the songs that I do. And like, man, I was going through, they go through some rough stuff. I still get those type of testimonies. Like, man, you really helped me through the death of my mother, the death of my partner, being a new mom or whatever. And that's really dope as well. But I'm okay with it though, because it's a season as I'm figuring it out. I think sometimes people always feel like they have to have, that's the problem. When you make a profession out of being a teacher, once you realize you really don't, you never give yourself space to be like, what should I be teaching people? Because you're always constantly teaching and there's never a pause to be like, I should be reconsidering what I'm teaching people. I can't do that because my livelihood depends on me teaching people what I know. And right now, what I know is that I don't know a lot. I know so much that I realize that I don't know very much.
And that's been that was probably when you walked away. To me, that was probably the most difficult part, right? Because from what I know, I mean, I'm the type of person, I don't just appreciate content people produce. I appreciate the minds behind the content. So when I see you and the body of work that you've been able to produce and what you're able to do outside of what people can see, I don't think people understand and can appreciate how brilliant you are. And I want to say that you're a very brilliant guy, and it's quite intimidating. So when I was like thinking about how do I talk to Joe, I will often retreat into the idea that I can't. There's nothing that I can say. I don't think that there's a thought that I could present to him that he hasn't thought of. No. I don't think that there's an idea we can discuss that he hasn't attempted to turn the stone over for. And so I would just be like, well, I guess the best I could do is just pray for him if I want to see, something happen in his life. And then when I began to have conversations with you, I realized, it's not intimidating to talk to you, but I think still even at this moment, it's almost like, man, how do you talk to someone who's studied? How do you intellectually, and I guess that goes back down to what is my purpose to even have these conversations? Because I'm not trying to sway you or persuade you, but you think that should be your mission. Like, I'm a Christian. Joe is saying that he's not a Christian. My duty is to bring him on back. Mm-hmm. That is like one of the most compelling drives that is within me when I find myself thinking about just like, bring Joe back. And rightfully so, because I'm a Christian, right? I should be wanting you to.
I can skip past this part, but like Ezekiel's a good dude, man. Like one of my dudes that like, from the jump, he didn't try to make me some like project, but he also, I like the balance. Like I get it. He gonna say I'm praying for you, stuff like that. Like, and we just good. We cool. Like I respect his beliefs. I don't, none of my friends, I try to be careful when I make Christian jokes. Some jokes I feel like I can make because I've earned that right. I've been a Christian. I know the space. And so I do feel like I'm part of the in group in some sense, but in another sense, I get it. I don't truly believe the way you believe. And so it is insensitive for me to, make certain jokes. And so I try to be very respectful of his faith. And, he's been a good dude. I like Ezekiel.
Believe this. I get it, bro. Like it's really wild. So I can't even try to get you.
Let me skip past this.
It's another form, I assume, of deconstructing Christian, which is kind of filtering past man-made understandings and ideologies of who Jesus is and what this Christian faith is. And in her argument, she begins to pile together all of the different ways that evangelicals, basically she's basically a liberal, basically. And she's basically showing how, man, Christians or our Christian ideology is very conservative. So, there's so much discrimination against Black. There's patriarchy, people don't respect and people don't give dignity to those part of the LGBT community, all of these things. And so she piles everything together. And I think where we differ is I believe that you're saying that there should be some deconstruction. There should be some detangling so that at the end we can find the purest form of what we should be believing in. I believe that if you take that route and you make you and your intellect the parameters or the foundation for that, then we could all end up in different places.
Yes.
Yeah. So for you, that's okay. For me, I think that if we are going to detangle, and this might be the Christian way to do it, then we have to detangle using the scriptures, right?
But how did you come to that conclusion? But through your own intellect or some deeper existential moment that was personal to you and nobody else?
Yes.
That is a parameter that you've made with your mind.
No.
How not?
Because I think that's because the scripture tells us how profitable. Okay, so you're trying
and what did you use to read that scripture?
Okay. So beyond the scripture. So you're asking me about beyond the scripture. I have a journey with the God of that Bible, right? And so I know we're landing at
that sounds extremely subjective, and that can lead anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. I hear that. That is the subjective part. The not so subjective part are the scriptures.
No, it's not. Because even that, you had to use your own subjective experience to verify that the scriptures are objective.
This is a rabbit hole of a conversation.
Sure.
We cannot.
I love Ezekiel.
At a place where we,
I've just heard so many online and in person, like no matter how they try to word it, they try to figure out how it can be objective. It's like it's still at the end of the day it comes down, which is why I love Soren Kierkegaard, Fear and Trembling. I thought he's a Christian author, a philosopher as well, considered the father of existentialism. And what I loved about him was that he was like, man, it is deeply subjective. It is beyond the rational. It comes down to this is an experience that you have to have and that you have to walk the journey either as believing or before believing.
So the problem for
in
me,
an irrational sense.
And to me, I think we can exist in a world where how do we even get the names that we see for God except for groups or individuals experiencing God in those parameters?
I wish I could play this so much
God
faster.
was Jehovah Jireh because
I don't know why it's not.
God was Jehovah.
So later,
Let me try it again. Let me close Spotify, open it back up, and see if it'll let me speed it up.
transliteration to King James, there was no J's in there. That's really a change.
Nope, it's not let me do it.
Yes, even then.
We're not going there. We're
just saying.
not going to do it. We're not. We can call subjective, and I think
There's so much time left on this. Okay, let me skip to the LGBTQ part.
And no, I'm not. But yes, subjective.
everything. Mm-hmm. But for you personally, do the tenets of our faith
Here we go.
inform the way you live?
I think it's one. I think anybody who lives in the Western world, and maybe even beyond that, it'd be difficult to not think in a judeo-christian. I mean, our Ten Commandments are, our like the Ten Commandments is, deeply influenced how we've created our judicial system and how, it'd be hard not to even those who advocate this deeply individualistic culture and this deeply humanitarian culture that pushes for people to have their own subjective experience with spirituality or with themselves, that is does not have to rely on the community around them. It can be strongly argued that notion is a great grandchild of Christian thought.
of the Reformation that happens where Martin Luther puts the 95 pieces on the door. I'm like, man, and within that, he challenges the Roman Catholic Church. And we have this idea that, no, it's not the church that stands in between God and the individual. The individual is Jesus that stands between God and the individual. We don't have to go. And now there's a deeply existential individual experience. And we take that, and that is I don't know, y'all. I feel like I be making sense when I'm talking. In my brain so far, like, there's a couple of lags, but I feel like I've been making sense. It makes sense. I get what I'm saying. Does it not make sense to y'all? Is that a thing? Rachel said, what exactly do you want to find out from Christians? That's what I'm confused. I'm not trying to find out. I'm having a conversation. I don't know if I've said I want to find out something from Christians. I don't know if I want to find out anything from Christians any more than I want to find out from anyone else. Like, I don't know. I think that also to act as if Christians are not the minority in the West, in the United States. Like, even if they're just culturally Christian, Christianity, we are steeped in it. So you can't get around it. So that's also why it's so surprised. People are like, why are you still talking about Christianity? I was like, because if a fish could talk, would it talk about water? I'm sure it would talk about water sometimes. We're just in it. We're in judeo-christian thought. Like, we're in a very judeo-christian influenced culture. Even if a lot of it you may say is ungodly and antichrist, it still is very much steeped in Christian thought. You can't escape it. So you kind of, yeah, I like talking about it. You can't not talk about it. How are you going to talk about Donald Trump without talking about Christianity? Evangelicalism. You can't. How are you going to talk about the divide on abortion rights without somehow talking about how evangelicalism plays a role in that divide? How are you going to talk about social justice? How are you going to talk about Black people's plight in America without also including the civil rights movement, but also including how the American evangelical church played a massive role in perpetuating the oppression of Black people in America? It's on both sides of the coin. How do you talk about white supremacy in America, LGBT queer folk? How do you talk about their place in America without confronting or talking about Judeo-Christian thought? Like, you can't talk about any serious issue in America. How can you talk about Israel and Gaza without talking about how Western evangelicalism has supported Israel, has in many ways funded Israel, how we perceive Muslims, how we perceive the dignity of Muslim people and Muslim countries? It's inescapable, man. State how drastically that has affected modern society from then on, the Enlightenment, all that stuff. Like, it can pay a lot of royalties to Judeo-Christian thought, particularly Protestant Christian thought, and so forth. And so I say all that to say, yeah, obviously, it's as if does a fish know it's wet, like we're in it. So it's hard to escape it. But in a very intentional sense, I have no problem critiquing the Bible. I have no problem reading through the Bible and also thinking, man, they probably didn't write that. That probably didn't really happen. And still seeing, but what are they trying to say what are they trying to tell the reader that they experienced? And what are they trying to invite the reader to experience as well? And I think that's the more important thing, rather than if the Red Sea really parted, or if Jonah really went in a whale, or if Jesus ever rose from the grave. I have a writing on my
dry erase board. I just write things that I think about all the time. And this was slightly influenced by the quote that I saw in the book by Dale Allison Jr., The Historical Christ and the Theological Jesus, who says that you, unlike what Homegirl was saying, you can't detangle who Jesus was from what Jesus' followers thought about him, because Jesus' followers wrote about him and their thoughts about him are inextricably tangled in who he was. So I believe that Jesus of Nazareth historically really lived. He was a historical person, and it may be difficult to tease out who he actually was.
Maybe we should talk about this at the beginning of the beginning of that probably would be more interesting for Christians to hear me say, I do believe Jesus was a historical figure. Jesus of Nazareth really did live. He really got crucified by the Romans and yada, yada, yada. Like, yeah.
From what his followers believed about him, because they're the ones who wrote it.
I'm pretty sure Ezekiel believes that the Bible is infallible and inerrant. I've always known Ezekiel to have pretty straightforward, mainstream views of the Bible, Christ-centered views of the Bible, you know. So yeah, he's, for the most part, I don't think he has any real like unorthodox views of the Bible or of Jesus. He believes Jesus is God, believes in the triune God, believes in the resurrection, physical resurrection, believes Jesus is coming back. He believes in the rapture, I'm sure. Yeah, he's pretty traditional Christian.
But still, in saying that, there's a quote that he had in there that kind of influences a quote that I wrote on the board. And it says that the resurrection never happened. The resurrection always happens.
Okay, y'all heard me talk about this already. Let's get to the LGBTQ part.
Really? As well. Yeah, I think I watched the whole thing and I commented on it as well.
Amen.
Oh, here we go.
To what many mainstream Christians may approach the scriptures like when they're teaching about it, and the things that we've talked about on the tour, or even a pastor would, I'm not saying it never, I'm kind of torn. I don't really know. But if it never happened, it doesn't change the fact that it always happens.
That's the preaching, Joe. I remember.
If you call this number right now,
don't. You are
in your life, we can take this and say, man, God takes dead things and makes them alive.
Yeah, this was my point about the resurrection always happens. And I'm also not saying that the resurrection never happened. I say that as a thing. Even if the resurrection never happened, the resurrection always happened. Maybe that's a better clarification for me to say, even if the resurrection never happened, it always happens. That's probably a better way, rather than saying the resurrection never happened, because I have no way to prove that. I think there are really good reasons to believe that it didn't happen. And I think that in order to believe it does happen, you have to have a lot more involved in your worldview to kind of make that happen. But yeah.
Come on, preaching Joe. That's the one I remember.
Yeah, so the frame on the left is just supposed to be a still image, because we're listening on Spotify now because there's no video for this part of the interview. So I just put my clip on the screen to make it look like we're really watching a video. Just a thumbnail. Better than just watching me like this, listening to it. So we'll just do that.
Amen.
That's the preaching Joe. I remember.
If you call this number right now,
don't. You are really on a run. I was really seeing the anointing flow from
I
you,
got a
bro.
prayer cloth for you.
Stop. Now let me ask you, man. There's a lot going on in this world, and I'm sure having a biblical worldview gave you shape to the conversations that you have. But thinking about men, women. First of all, the hot topic. I've had a guy on this platform, and we talked about the LGBT.
Here we go.
I watched that one. I think probably in its entirety, and commented
Really?
as well. Yeah, I think I watched the whole thing and I commented on it as well.
Amen.
Yeah. Your followers were, but yeah.
They roughed you up?
No, not roughed me. It was really just one of them. And the other ones, I think they were confused by what I was asking. But yeah, I watched it.
What did you ask?
Well, finish your point. I mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
My point is just how it doesn't shape the way you view the fallenness of this world. And when I say fallen, as a Christian,
it's metaphorical. I take it as metaphorical.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a fallenness about the world. There's an ideal that we would like to see in the world, and we're not at that ideal.
Absolutely. And so this is the part that I will get canceled for everyone that's not in the faith. When I look at the LGBTQ community and how it's expanding and what it's now expanding to, I'm looking at not just a community of people who have, chosen a particular identity and are living lives, especially if you're actively living a life that is contradictory to the Word of God. But now it's going, now it's going off the hinges into, you got the trans movement. You got a lot of these things that we got identity that is really left up to interpretation. Mm-hmm. Where do you stand when it comes to sexual identity, the LGBTQ community? I know you have
Just queer friends.
Queer friends.
Just queers.
You got queer friends.
I'm just trying to say all the letters.
Let me just pause this because I decided to go and look at the comments of this. People are listen to y'all Christians. My homie Ebenezer was like, "Yo, what's happening? What are the saints saying?" I said, "What are the saints doing?" He said, "What the saints doing now?" I said, "The saints is sainting, man. They is sainting. They is sainting." So this girl said, "I had a hard time understanding Joe. He was all over the place. Apart from him making his own intelligence his God." But I strongly feel he should definitely get tested for his rapid thoughts. I probably should. I've already talked about this with my therapist. We are strongly suspicious that I have ADD. Strongly suspicious that I have ADD. So yes, rapid thoughts all over the place. But then she says, it's clear this is warfare. Keep praying for him to have a personal encounter with God. I don't think he has ever. Boy, hey, man, I put myself out there. So you got to roll with the punches, I guess.
I talk to my friends and like, I'm queer. Like, cool, queer. That's easy. That kind of is a nice, for what I understand, a nice just kind of.
But I see that even my guy that I brought on here, his name is Reg. He said that he wasn't in complete congruence with everything that the queer community stands for. So I wanted to kind of see where you are. You consider yourself an ally?
Yeah, not in like some I don't know.
I do realize I have rapid thoughts. I go on tangents, but I don't think that having tangents or having rapid thoughts equates that you don't know what you're talking about. And I think that's what people are like, because they are not following the tangent. That means that I don't know what I'm talking about, or that I've not spent time with this, or that I'm just confused, and that I don't have any serious coherent thoughts on the matter. I can speak coherently sometimes. Sometimes my brain is all over the place. I don't even realize that I just left a thought until I go back and watch a video. I get that. I get that. But please do not use that as a way to dismiss somebody. Maybe ask for clarification, but it doesn't mean that they don't know what they're talking about. So let me just say that.
Back down, man.
Though. No, okay. I am. And one of my friends just told me, I was like, I was having the same thing. Like, you're an ally. I was like, yeah, I guess I'm an ally. She's like, you're an ally, Joe, because you advocate for us. You are an ally to us by your association and love for us. And your desire for our self-determination and safety and dignity in this world, you are an ally.
You don't like labels. That's what it is, I think.
Yeah, I think sometimes they just I think words matter. And so, yes, we have to get through life using words. So I'm not anti-words, but sometimes when you have words that are so packed, it can kind of, I just would like to unpack them a little bit before using them so flippantly.
Okay.
But very much so that in a sense of, yeah, I have people in my life that I deeply, deeply love, and the part of their identity that is called queer is just that, a part of their identity. They're my friends, they're humans. And I take that and expand that out into what I see out in the world, even people I don't know. I'm like, they're humans. Again, going back to this quote that I have in my Instagram bio, let's assume for a moment that everyone here is human, and I've had my own struggle as a human figuring out life, the whole Christian thing and what I believe and how do you live that out. And I understand how difficult it is to to live a human life. I don't understand it specifically in the context of being queer, but
I had to make that clear. I was like, I understand it's difficult to be a human. I don't understand. Because one of the rumors was when I first left Christianity and I had my hair dyed blonde, people were like, oh, next thing you know, he's going to come out and be gay. I was like, why? Why has it got to be that? And trust me, listen, at this point, y'all would have known by now. I live in LA. I came from Atlanta. I got queer friends. That's no hiding on that matter. I had merch that was pink. So clearly I have no problem bending, the borders, the boundaries of what is considered typical masculinity. I think in many ways I definitely don't fall into your sort of quote unquote typical masculine, but then also at the end of the day, I'm just a nigga. I'm for real. But so clearly I have no problems. Like if I was going to be gay at this point, like y'all would have known by now.
Like in the sense of like, man, life is hard. It's hard to find peace and love in this world. And if you have found that in this life, like I will not be someone to stand in front of it. I would be someone to champion it. And to the degree that it is, it helps people flourish. And it's not, obviously I'm not talking about you can just do whatever you want to anybody you want to do. I'm using this within reasonable confines, but yeah, like I'm an ally in that sense, and how I get my sense of morality from that, again, deeply existential. It is partly, I think, my existentialism is also inextricably linked to my judeo-christian background and just me living in a judeo-christian influenced society. But still that idea of like, love others as you love yourself. I think that's a very difficult thing to do, but very simple way to wrap up what it means to do the law of God, right? To do this, to love. I haven't read that part about it in a long time, but I believe that's what he says, that the whole of the law is summed up as this: to love others as you love yourself.
Here's my. I agree, because you have a lot of conversation about the humanity, and we had that conversation approaching people as human first, and I think that's a lesson learned. But I think when we're talking about all of the matters and all of my concerns with what's happening with the community as one and what it's expanding to, I have a few concerns. One, and it might
switch
be
the thumbnail,
but a lot of people that say that they're living the life of, homosexual, they live that life as a response to traumatic.
Living the life of homosexual. What kind of sentence is that, Ezekiel? Living the life of homosexual. Why are you gay? Why are you gay?
Situations that they've had in their lives. Not everyone, but a great majority.
I can't speak with any authority on that.
I would say a large percent. Large percent could be 30.
But aren't we all living out?
Okay, let me
our sexuality
yes.
and life in general through some sort of traumatic experience.
Let me finish. As a vessel of, I don't know what you would consider yourself, because you're an ally, so you want people to experience love. Okay, cool. But I would consider you also a vessel of positivity. You want to direct people so that they can live their best lives. So my question is, for the individual that has taken a path of life as a response or defense mechanism of something that has happened to them that was not supposed to happen to them, that wrongly happened.
I'm about to push back.
I have the guy that came on and did they did the podcast with me, who lived that life. He was introduced to it because some activity that happened to him and with him as a child that should not have happened. Other people that he's counseling and working with said it was through pornography or whatever the case may be. Sure. There might be a good small percentage that just start to feel a particular type of way, and people categorize them as that, and then whatever the case was. But it feels like from the conversations that I have had and from the people that I've had conversation with and just seen, it seems like a lot of this choice is coming from a place of, hey, this happened to me, so it steered my passion, steered my desire. And for me to be a good brother, I would have to at least say, hey, it's important, whether they're living that life or they feel like they have to be a womanizer, or they feel like, okay, so you see what I'm doing. I'm classifying and bunching that lifestyle as sin. So just note that I'm doing that.
He's doing that, not me.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Okay.
So if someone's living a life of adultery, or someone is living a life, or they're not honest with themselves and they're hypocritical, whatever the case may have been, as a force or a vessel of positive change, and I'm just going to keep it as general as that, should I not at least at the minimum be concerned to ensure that they're not living that lifestyle as a response? I would just want to ensure that they're finding love, from purity.
But who are you to decide what that looks like? Especially if you're not walking in community with them. Who are you to decide that as a global thing, that this is why you're doing that and this is what the lifestyle.
I didn't
sure.
I
Okay.
didn't say that.
That's my first pushback.
I'm saying,
my other pushback is to
okay.
also
Okay.
is to critique the categorization that you made
Okay.
as far as you womanizer, adultery, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And those other examples include people who are violating the consent of other people. Hello.
Well,
I consent to this monogamous relationship.
okay.
And I'm having sex with you and loving you under the consent that you will not be doing that to other people, or womanize, or the objectification of my body and so forth, and X, Y, Z. But even then, say if somebody who's just promiscuous and they're having a bunch of consensual sex, and that may come out of whatever traumatic X, Y, Z. I just don't think it's I think there's a lot wrong with that. From that perspective of like someone who, whether it comes from trauma or not, I think that it is it is a very vain journey to go down of only wanting to find physical intimacy without love and affection and security and so forth.
What do you mean by that? It's a vain journey to who are you talking?
I'm talking about, I'm giving a caveat in the sense that I agree personally, and even statistically, I could probably argue that, the sexual, sort of liberation movement of sexuality that really benefits, ironically, men. Like the whole, I have a huge critique about
Really?
Yeah, I don't even know if I want to say this now, but I just find it ironic. I think it's something to consider that with the liberation of sex workers and OnlyFans becoming extremely popular and so forth. I've said that on this channel before. That your liberation is still satisfying the patriarchal urge and system, but that's but at the same time,
two are playing that game.
Who am I to tell you what you are allowed to do from a global perspective? What you to do with your body if this is consensual, and we can talk about maybe data and legislation that can be backed and have an intersubjective conversation around it, but from the purely individual perspective, I'm not going to tell somebody that they can't be a sex worker. In the same way, I can't tell somebody what they want to do with their body and the natural feelings that they have to love someone of the same sex, or to trans or identify as however they would like to identify.
So what you're saying is you have zero. Say you went global. I didn't even go global, and I'm not going global. You have,
but you didn't go there. But the insinuation is that they start local and then go objective. So let's global. Bring it home. So I was beating you to the finish line.
Bring it home.
Okay,
Father. I want to ensure that my child is taking a path. I'm not the guy that if my child is just saying, I want to be like this and I want to do this, I'm not going to at least be curious to know and make sure that they're walking a path that is directed from a pure place. So,
and that's your child, though. Sure,
Okay.
child. And
Cool.
even that child will be, at the end of the day, he is still his own human.
His own person.
That
Okay.
At some point, I will ask you the same question. Even as his father, who are you to say what he would want to do? Because he is his own human, because
exactly.
you don't own him.
At the least.
But as he's under your protection and care and supervision,
Yes.
to the best of your knowledge and wisdom,
Yes.
that is your child and your responsibility.
Gotcha.
Not everybody else.
Okay, cool. All right, now let's expand it from my child. I have
It's not a one-to-one.
I have a friend.
Go ahead.
I have a friend.
Okay.
My friend is living this life because if it's truly, I'm gonna say this, and people, I have a feeling that I'm gonna be canceled a little bit.
No, you're not. It's fine.
Okay.
People said,
Okay.
there's a white girl going around saying the N-word. She's getting a lot of followers right now.
Bro, my ribs. My ribs, man. All right. All right. So it's about sex, bro. We want to keep having conversations about love and love.
He was wilding here, and I check.
To me.
He is wilding here, and I check him on this too. So
It's about sex because there's nothing. I think it's about sex.
I know you do.
Yeah, it's about sex because
I know you do.
outside of sex, there is nothing that prohibits from you living in a loving relationship that is physically
And I'm going to
affectionate.
push back so hard. Go keep going. I'm trying.
You will.
Man, why do we not have enough time for this? Go ahead.
An affectionate, loving, communal relationship with people that are in the same sex.
And you
It's
can't see it, and that's fine. It's not for you to
sensual.
see. It's not for you to see. I can't see why. It's not for you. It's not for you to see. I can't see it either. But it's not for me to see. I can't see why.
You don't feel like you have responsibility. I do.
That's fine. It's a responsibility that you put on yourself for whatever reason. But who am I to say? And then my other pushback is you say it's about sex. It's not. Because it's not. And it may prove, and I don't want to put you on Front Street, but it may prove how much you don't do community and know people who are in loving relationship, in same-sex relationships. And it's sex is when I do life with them, sex is not the only thing.
Okay.
It's as much a part of their life as it is part of yours. So yes, if I was talking about you and Kayana, is sex a big part of your life? Absolutely, I'm sure.
It's
but
only
it's not
about
the
sex.
thing.
I didn't
There's
say
so
that.
much more to your relationship than the sex.
What I mean to say is, it is the category of sensuality that causes this discussion to even be a discussion. Because outside of that, it's the romance. It's being able to. It's the attraction. That's what I mean by sex.
Mm-hmm.
If outside of that, there's nothing that is prohibited with your. Even the scriptures calls us to give each other a holy kiss. So I'm saying
attraction, though.
Okay.
It still is attraction.
Attraction.
And what if
Okay.
they're just not attracted to the opposite
Okay.
sex? You still have to be. I mean, even if it ain't about, it can't be all about sensuality to have a sustainable relationship. In the example of you and Kayana, but there is attraction. It started with that at least. We all get old and wrinkly.
But what is
one day.
attraction?
A lot of things. Some
Appreciation.
people are attracted beyond just the physical. Some people, what do you call them? Demisexual people who are attracted to.
Why do we got to sexualize it?
Because there's a sexual component to it for some people.
That's why I said that.
But it's not just sexual either. It's all. But to try to distinct. Come on now, because you know better than to try to make some distinction between the two. Because you know that washing dishes is intimacy, and it'll get you some too.
Okay.
Cleaning up around the house and doing what she wants you to do. You also know it's gonna get you some later. It's because it ain't. It's no real specific divide between the two. It's all your whole marriage is intimacy and sensuality.
I hear you.
Washing the dishes is sensuality. Caring for your children is sensuality. All those things. And I don't and don't hear me saying that it's, you know what I mean when I say that. It's all that love that you showed to her is. He tried to catch me slipping. You know what I mean? Is that you being a good father is attractive to your wife. It's so to try to compartmentalize as sexuality is like there's one aspect of life that has been over prioritized and it's been made, it's all about sex. I'm like, well, no, it's not all about sex, but sensuality and sexuality. One, we are that. We are sensual beings, and in a relationship with someone, trying to distinguish what is sensuality and what is not sensuality is, even as Christian marriage counselors know this, when you try to distinguish between the two, then that's where the sex goes wrong, because you know that sensuality is everything, that it's all wrapped up, that being a good listener is sensuality. Washing the dishes is sensuality. Caring for someone, listening to them, and then remembering that and then doing it without them telling you to do it later is sensuality. All of that is wrapped up in it. I remember Tim Keller, who gave this example about communion, which I thought was great. And he was like, man, the reason why unbelievers aren't allowed to have communion because they don't have the relationship that goes with it. And he compared the communion to sex, saying that the reason why there's the Christian morality that sex should not be had outside of marriage, because it's much like the communion. The sex doesn't mean anything without everything else that's involved with the marriage. Same way with communion. You don't want to take communion if you have nothing to remember about. Do this in remembrance of me. You're not remembering anything if you're not a Christian. So the communion is not communion in and of itself. Communion is wrapped up in the entire relationship that you have with Jesus, in the same way sex is wrapped up in the entire relationship. And so I'm using all that. I didn't know how I never thought that I would make a Tim Keller reference in trying to defend the humanity of queer folks, but here we are. And that is to say that, yes, is it about sex? Absolutely. Is it only about that? No. And then in another sense, is it only about that? Yes, because sensuality it's in every part of who we are as beings, as loving creatures. When we're in a relationship with someone, just because you're not having sex with them at the time does not mean that sensuality is not wrapped up in that, because it's a holistic approach. And when you try to approach it in some compartmentalized way, it is another way of dehumanizing them. And that's why I say from the jump, let's all assume that everyone here is human. Let's assume for a moment that everyone here is human and having a fully human experience, whether you understand that experience or not, is not that's not part of the discussion. It's like, well, I can't understand it, so therefore it must be wrong. One, you don't understand it because you don't live near it. You don't live in community. You don't live in proximity. So therefore, yes, of course it's going to be foreign to you. But if you actually live in context, in community with people that you love who are queer, sex is when I'm with my friends, I'm not thinking about, man, they probably that's weird. I don't do that with my heterosexual friends. I'm not thinking about how they going to have sex tonight and what that's weird. They just my friends who are heterosexual. And then I have friends who are queer and homosexual. I don't be thinking about that. They not thinking about that. Or maybe they are, but it ain't none of my business.
It's a turn on, and I don't mean just sexual. It's a turn on in all the ways that happens to include sexuality.
And you're hearing me, right? So why, if truly at the core of it is, I want to be able to love this man, God doesn't keep you from loving a man. I think that's why I said it's about sex, because I think where it becomes the sinful is to live with them as you would live with two becoming one flesh. That two becoming one flesh has to do with intimacy. Yes, sacred intimacy of unity that's outside of physical intimacy, but includes physical intimacy that is unique to a relationship between a man and a woman. And so what I'm saying, what is boiling down to, my perspective is my personal responsibility. This is why I do this podcast. I believe that I need to share a truth that makes sure that people's hearts go back to God's original design for them. A lot of us have been deterred from God's original design because of things that have happened, things that we've seen, things that have happened to us. And I don't blame, I'm not, in fact, if you watch the episode between me and my brother, Reginald, you saw me say, my perspective, my whole dynamic in the way that I deal with men or even women that have that story is completely different. I don't just wait for them. I draw myself to them. I was probably a self-proclaimed homophobe at one point in time in my life. I am not that anymore. I care for them and I desire. Don't. What was that? You slightly 32%.
Well, keep going.
What? You're so wrong for that. Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, what I'm saying is my heart for any individual, and I think this is what your comment was about. We're going to mention your comment. I'm not trying to pick at people that go through this, but I'm not going to take them out. I'm not going to patty cake truth when it comes to, hey, sin came in, entered in some way, and you need to see God clearly and you need to see yourself clearly. That goes for anybody all across the board. Specifically, my focus is men right now, but that goes for across the board. Your perspective.
This is my face right now. This is a perfect.
I don't believe your perspective.
This is a perfect thumbnail.
When you say, "Who am I?" I don't like that perspective. Who am I means to exculpate yourself or exonerate yourself from any responsibility from giving positive direction. A whole joke. I don't care.
And I give positive direct. I have a responsibility to the people, as far as locally goes. From my perspective, the friends that I have in my life, I have the responsibility to love them into the best, to just play a part. At the end of the day, it is their journey.
Yes. Okay.
And I'm just there to love them into the best version of who they want to be.
It doesn't matter who they want to be.
Doesn't matter who they want to be, to the point that it is consensual. It's not, we're not talking about other, I don't have to keep making the disclaimer. I don't want to get into it. What about, what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Peddlers. Say that. Like, I don't know what's going on YouTube. So, my point is that, with the friends that I have, it's not for me to I don't understand it in the sense of, I know I can't put myself in their shoes, in a very one-to-one sense. I don't know what it's like to be attracted to the same sex. I don't see the point in it for myself. Ain't nothing that does it for me, but clearly something does it for you in the way that it does it for me with a woman. And I can relate in that sense. And I want love. I don't want just sex. I want love and affection and stability and a home and a dog and children. I want all the things that you want within your same sex or however queer relationship that you may be in. And I'm not going to be, as a friend, I'm not going to be someone who actively demonizes you for that. Just because I can't one-to-one understand what you feel, but I can feel being human, and that's my point. I know what it feels like to be human, and that's.
You make me want to correct something. Okay, forgive me. I don't mean that it's only about sex. And we just had a conversation about making sure that I'm seeing the whole person, right? And so to say it like that almost, it makes me just kind of make this dismissive, broad stroke animalistic claim on humans. And that's not what I was trying to do. What I was trying to do was I was trying to make a point. I don't think I made it as well. But what I was trying to say, I guess, is I don't think that scripturally nothing keeps individuals from loving the same sex
you have to assume
in a platonic way.
And to your point, I've always thought this. Though I'm reading some other perspectives now of liberal scholars who wrestle with scriptures and theology around homosexuality to see what they think about it. But the longest, my perspective was, as a Christian and even after a Christian, I was like, I don't know how anybody would hold to an inerrant, infallible scripture. And
kind of getting to what you're talking about, Stephen King in here. Yeah. So I've held the view for the longest, and I'm questioning that view now. I've always believed that the Bible is pretty clear in its opposition to homosexual relationships, homosexual relations. And it was pretty obvious. And I've always wondered, as a Christian and as a non-Christian, I've always wondered how Christians try to make that work, being pro-LGBTQ while also being pro-inerrancy, pro-infallibility. I never saw how you made it work, but there are some scholars out there who have made some pretty plausible. It's interesting. I forget who's the guy, Dan McClellan. He's been doing some series on that, talking about the classification of homosexuality, of homosexual relations in the first century, and how it really was more so of a class issue, which was a quite interesting perspective to think about it. It makes sense to me at first glance, that really more so homosexual relations between women weren't even really addressed. It was really more so the problem with men having homosexual relations. This is not me saying that I stand behind this, I die on this hill, this is what I believe. I'm saying this is what some scholars would say, and I think it's interesting. And they would say that actually the problem that comes in that particular culture is that, or at least in that particular theological perspective, is that the man is the head of everything, of society, of family, of everything, of sex. So even a woman being on top of you in sex is inappropriate because the man is to be on top and never to be on the bottom. And so in a homosexual relationship, you by default, somebody got to be on the bottom, right? So there's already an inappropriate relationship happening there according to that particular worldview. And so that's what New Testament scriptures were addressing, was this sort of inappropriate or the perspective behind it. I that's my sort of basic understanding of it. I haven't spent much time diving into it. It has not been a huge concern of mine. But yeah, somebody said it depends on the position, mate. Well, listen, yeah, but at the end of the day, somebody's gonna be on the top, somebody's gonna be on the bottom. You ain't gonna be that creative for a half hour or hour, however long you're doing it. At some point, somebody's gonna have to just lay down. So, no matter who, whether it's, yeah.
Still believe that God is okay with people having homosexual relations. I think it's relations and relationships. That was my perspective. Now I'm like, well, one,
I do want to know your thoughts on this.
I don't think that you have to believe in the inerrancy of Scripture to be a Christian. So I think you could very well, because I know confidence.
So that's my thing as well. Now, like, reason why I haven't been too much concerned about how people make sense of homosexuality in the Bible is because I don't believe you have to believe in inerrancy of the scriptures to be a Christian, or obviously to be a non-Christian. So to me, it's not of as much importance to know what the theological stance is of first century ancient humans who have very different contexts for sexuality and life than us here in the 21st century. So
that the Bible was written over wide groups of people who, to have this sort of special case for the Bible that somehow just because it's the word of God, therefore their opinions and their outdated, ancient opinions in cultural context is somehow easily distinguished from what God really wanted. I think if you run with that, you run into some real issues. And I think Christians always are trying to do that, trying to hold on to, not all Christians, the inerrancy holding Christians are trying to hold on to that inerrancy while also trying to make sense of the fact that, they wiped out the Canaanites, man. It wasn't just the soldiers. They went back and killed all the women and children, animals. What did the animals do? What did the animals do? It's because of their sin. Really? The kids were sinners, or they deserve to die too? Maybe this was very tribal, ancient way.
My point being here is that I think there's room to believe in the existence of the God who guided the writers of the Bible, and also realize that the writers and the people who were living in those times got it wrong. Because otherwise, what do you do with the genocide of the Canaanites? Other than being like, because otherwise, like, how do you make sense of that when people today say, well, God told me to go and slaughter all these people because of their sin, because of being infidels? That's what the Israelites did with the Canaanites. And Christians are like, well, God can do what he wants to with his subjects. If they were in sin, he's well within his rights to judge them with the sword of the Israelite. Man, you better be a hardcore cessationist. If that's the only way, because then you can be like, okay, well, God ain't giving no new revelation no more, so we don't have to worry about that no more. That's how you kind of tidy that up. Hey, God was well within his rights to give that in the Old Testament, but there's no more new revelation outside the Bible now, so problem solved. But I don't see how you be a non-cessationist and make sense of. I've seen people do it. William Lane Craig. The best explanation I've heard so far was from some Catholics, and if I understand their argument right, not to say that all Catholics believe this, but it was a Catholic apologist, and he was like, or we could consider that the Israelites got it wrong. That's the only way it makes sense to me, that y'all went in there and killed a bunch of people in the name of God. And how that relates to homosexuality, what I'm saying is that, like, it could be that we are dealing with ancient people who have very different sense of society and morality than we do. And we should take what they say and do with a grain of salt. Okay? Let's just not, because they were like, thank you, Trees, just because, like, if the people in the New Testament were just as human as we are, and you still think that people today hear from God truly, then I think it's reasonable to make room for the fact that maybe some people back then were really hearing from God and also doing some wild shit and saying some wild stuff that we don't have to do or say or believe today.
Of having religious duties and killing and pillaging for your God, and does it make God fully absent from the Bible? I'm not wiping that out, but you have to deal head on, and I think in an intellectually honest way. That's like, I've heard some apologists try to give some strong arguments for the genocide, and the only best one I've heard from is from a Roman Catholic who was like,
there I go.
Yeah, they were wrong, bro. They're just wrong. They should not have done the genocide. And so with that perspective, to bring it back full circle to the conversation, it's like, man, maybe
when you say intellectually honest, what you want is for us to be able to just cut and dry say, this part of scripture I'm not rocking with.
Yeah, and that's okay.
There you go. I said it.
That's okay. Y'all do it all the time anyway. It's just that it's pick and choose. Y'all, I'm not rocking with it because Jesus sacrificed himself. Y'all make this way of, and even that is some weird.
Listening to myself now, because I get all riled up, I can see how I just sound like the angry agnostic, the angry antichrist right now. Yep. Y'all do it anyway. I see it. And I'm saying that as of now, I got a vein on my forehead for some reason. I look even more angry. Y'all do it anyway. Can I make it pop back out again? I see how I can come off as the irreverent, sacrilegious, angry. I just get a little excited sometimes when I'm talking. I'm not angry. I promise.
The people who are writing those Old Testament scriptures didn't even see it that way, but y'all make it work to where Jesus now fulfills these certain laws and it's okay. It's not all that cut and dry. That's why y'all be at each other's throats with the SDAs and whatever, because the Seventh-day Adventist folks, because they also see it. They make a pretty good argument, and y'all make a pretty good argument too, but it's not that cut and dry. And so there's always ways of saying, man, this don't cut it. The women not wearing the covering over their head in church or whatever. I mean, any one of them, I'm not saying it's wrong to believe those things. I'm just saying you are doing some type of exclusionary theology when you're like, I've got to find a reason why this doesn't apply today. And it might have been for the context of it, or this person did this.
Y'all already do it, is my point. You already do it. So finish the job.
You're always doing it. It's just maybe you're not always aware of it, or it's just how broad stroke do you want to do it, how specific you want to be about it, but you're already doing it. So just keep doing it. Just finish the job.
Joseph Solomon.
I didn't think this through before I said this. I don't know how this is going to come off when it comes on camera, but
No,
I think
I don't know how it's gonna come off. I got a little turned up for a
what
second.
I want to say.
I do. There's conviction, right? So we could either take two routes. One, I'm going to go extreme. And tomorrow, my wife is going to be wearing her tunic in church.
Cover it up, man.
Or I can believe that her hair is her covering.
Sure.
Right? Try to slide that in. I wish you saw the video of him saying that. He thought he really threw a zinger at me.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I do hear. I cannot say I don't hear you, and I can't say
And
that
don't
you're
hear me
not
saying
making
that
sense.
there's not a way to make sense of that scripture. All I'm saying is I'm pulling off examples off the top of my head, but from Genesis to Revelation, you have got to figure out what do you do with Songs of Solomon, who, by the way, they weren't married, and she all up in this man's room. We love to talk about Songs of Solomon and how sensual it was, and they weren't married.
But that was
How old were you when you realized that the people in Songs of Solomon wasn't married? How old were you when you realized that? And that's probably one of the reasons why Protestants try to start making it seem like, well, really, it was a metaphor for Jesus and the church, and it's not really literal. Because whoever was the love interest in Songs of Solomon was being fast. Go read it yourself, and you come back and tell me I could be wrong. Maybe you found something I don't know, but go read Songs of Solomon yourself and realize that, wait a minute, they was getting real sexy, and the wedding ain't happened yet. And Christians, I've heard some Christians be like, well, they were betrothed. So like, nah, betrothed, I know it ain't the same as engagement, but it ain't married. It was hunching. So what we gotta, and the point being that Christians will take that and then figure out how to make sense of it so that their worldview stays intact. You do it all the time, and yet you just try to act like you can't do it in other ways, or that is just.
I don't know what it was. I forget now. They weren't married.
how you know.
Read it. It wasn't. This is not no historical. Just read it. Whatever version, with a KJV, ESV. They weren't married. They were betrothed. Which I don't know what that fully means in that context. Whatever. They weren't. There's something different than just full out being married. So what do you make of that? I don't know. You have to figure out a way to.
They're betrothed, so that actually.
So listen, you're doing it what I just said. You always have to do it. You're gonna figure out a way to do it. You're gonna find a way to close the cognitive dissonance. So all I'm saying is finish the job. Keep doing it. Keep going. Yeah.
It may not be making sense to y'all, but in my brain, it's making total sense. I get the point that I'm trying to make, even though all these seem like very disparate and unconnected points. You follow my train of thought?
That contextualization is what you call subjectivity.
I'd never argued with that though.
Okay.
I never argued with that. Right?
What?
Subjectivity.
Yeah, sure. It's like I'm just saying, like the inerrancy is a tricky thing.
That is the.
And so that's
the inerrancy.
And it's very, very relevant to the conversation of, we're talking about homosexuality. It's like, well, like, do you believe that the Bible is inerrant? Do you believe that this was fully the word of God or fully the opinions of man or somewhere in between?
Yeah. And so.
And I sound like Satan in the garden, right? Which we don't even know.
Yeah. Do you really believe? I choose.
Were we ever told that the snake in the garden was actually Lucifer? Or is that just Christian tradition? Does it explicitly say that in the scripture? Do we find some sort of...
I do sound like Lucifer in the garden, even by asking about Lucifer in the garden. Like, do we read? I forget now. Are we told explicitly that was Satan, or is that
medical reason somewhere down the...
I told you I'll be going on tangents, y'all, and it all connects in my brain. I see it now. I see how it will not connect for others. But in my brain, the dots is connecting. I got the little cork board they be having on the interrogation videos, and they be like doing an investigation. And like, and then at this point we saw him here, and then we got a new suspect over here, and it's like all the little yarn strings with the pins all over the cork board. It all connects to me.
In the Old Testament, that's actually Lucifer.
You know it.
It's a creation story. I think the creation story, I don't have to be literal. I think it's a beautiful story of origins. Every group of people had an origin.
Yo, there's this video of this dude. It's called Esoterica. Man, I got to look up more of his credentials, but this dude, he be going in on the Old Testament. He's a doctorate. He be going in on Old Testament history. And like he has a whole video about the origin of Yahweh. Nuts. And how Yahweh and Baal were essentially the same God at one point. It's ironic. We really don't have a lot of Yahweh. Just kind of came out of nowhere. There was a bunch of other gods that we don't hear about Yahweh. Then all of a sudden, kind of Yahweh is very obscure. And then the next thing you know, he's the biggest thing in the world. But Yahweh was a tribal war god who was over thunder and rain. And he was one God among many, but I mean, when you're the God of rain in a desert, you become really, really important. You definitely want to have him on your side. And he has a wife. He then eventually loses that wife. Like the wife is gone. He's too. I gotta find the link now. Where is it at? Because it was a really good. Origin of Yahweh. The storm god. This guy right here. I'm going to pull it up. Y'all see my algorithm? It's atheist converts live on TikTok. It's basketball, philosophy, Pop the Balloon to Find Love, House of Dragons. I don't even watch that. And then Draymond Green, emotional reaction to tape. And then they go ahead and let go of Draymond too. Go on, let him go. Wait, what? Why won't this go?
It was abandoned for the.
Is this video, The History of Yahweh, Storm God of Israelite Deity. Really good. It's an hour and 44 minutes, but y'all done sat here and watched me for 3 hours. So I'm sure one day this week you can find this video and watch it for an hour and 44 minutes. Also, YouTube Premium is clutch, man. I don't know how y'all be getting through watching YouTube without YouTube Premium. That mug is $15.99 a month. And if I have to cancel any of my subscriptions to save some money, it will not be YouTube. It will be Netflix. It will be Hulu. It will be everything else. My Apple Care. It will be everything but YouTube Premium. So this was phenomenal. This was a phenomenal video. It's quite interesting. He just goes through like how Yahweh went from being one God among many to being, I forget, it's not called monotheism. He went, and that's mostly what the Old Testament, if you read it, I noticed that even as a Christian, if you notice that monotheism wasn't really a thing in the Bible, in the Old Testament, in the Jewish Bible. He's a God among many other gods, and it becomes this, it's not monotheism, in other words, mono something, where basically he's not the only God, but he is the best God. Like, ain't nobody messing with Yahweh. Like, we see that when he goes against the Egyptian gods, he fights other gods, he fights Baal. Like, these other gods weren't. And then eventually they go from being other real gods that Yahweh goes to war with. And then eventually he's just, the other idols are like, they're idols. They're not real gods. They're just like, we act like they're gods, but they're not actually gods. They're a figment of our imaginations. So it's like, yeah, the first commandment is that you put no other gods before me. Like, because there were other gods. It was like, hey, other gods exist. That's fine. Just know, don't put none of them before me. I forget what that term is called. It's mono something. Oh, Miss Matthews, what's going on? What you doing here? So good to see you here. So it must be late where you're at. You're in Florida? Are you in Florida? Yeah, which by the way, let me just say, Miss Matthews, when I think about I remember one of these lives I was talking about how I think about masculinity and how when I think about I was just recently back home for Father's Day with my dad, and I think about the men that raised me that were not just my dad. Like when you think about Father's Day, it's not, yes, I have my dad and he played a huge part in my life, but there were other men who raised me, and Mr. Matthews was definitely one of those men who would pick me up from my house. He would go out of his way. He would pass the gym to come to my house over in Morse Valley, and then take me back over to the church gym and play basketball. And yeah, it was just, he was an integral. When I think about the men in my childhood who helped shape my view of what it means to be a man. I had a lot of negative examples through, movies and media and rap and stuff like that, but it was definitely also counteracted with a lot of really dope men in my church community, and Mr. Matthews was one of those. So please send him my love, and yeah, he is part of my fabric. So
the sacrifice theology.
Yeah, but check that mug out. Yeah, I think this podcast is pretty much wrapped up.
You think it's
God had a man. Let me stop, because that's a whole nother. Really live what they believe. I don't know. Obviously, we don't agree on a lot of stuff. We really don't. But I've met a lot of Christians, and I've been around a lot of Christians who I'm like, I don't think they really own what they say they own. Like publicly facing, they're one way, and then behind the scenes, I'm not even sure they actually believe what they say they really be believing. And there are some people that I have in my mind off the top of my head that I'm like, man, I don't agree with them, but at least they really about what they say they about. Mm-hmm. And you are one of those people that I can genuinely say that about. Wow. That has love, joy, peace, wow, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Thanks, and show love. And I genuinely think you believe what you say you believe. Like, I don't think you're just telling yourself that and telling everybody else that. I think you genuinely believe that. I know you're not perfect, mm-hmm, but I think you genuinely are trying to live out a life that is a replication of Christ. And so, shout out to you for being a friend to me.
That was everything, man. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, bro. And as much as we disagree, I do see the value in what you're saying. I genuinely see the value of what you're saying. Now,
Ezekiel gonna get heat now because he done brought me on his channel. So yeah, this is interesting to see. I thought I came on this podcast as I'm wrapping this up now. Yes, Ashley, I'm still here. As I'm wrapping this up, I'm finna go get me some Chick-fil-A and then go to bed. I think that, and yes, I did cook earlier, but I'm still hungry. So I just made spaghetti today, and then I realized I didn't have enough meat to make 2 servings. So I've only had 1 serving of it, and I really want another. So now I'm just gonna get some Chick-fil-A. But I came on this show uncombative. I really felt like I came on outside of the LGBT, but even uncombative. That's how me and Ezekiel talk. We talk heated, even if it's about something that's silly. Me and him, we talk that hard about stupid stuff, about imaginary stuff. So that's just our dynamic. But I came on here, I felt like really non-combative, and I'm not trying to confuse anyone. I'm just sharing my perspective. If you push back against me, I'll have my own pushback and, whatever. But it's really, I think I've still been overestimating the broader Christian community, because it still seems quite difficult for the large, what seems like online, for the bulk of people to really, I don't know, be kind and like, or just let people be. Like it's really quite interesting when you read the comments. Like all of them, I would say like 80% of them are at least passive aggressive. Like this Ezekiel's inner monologue, it was exhausting to watch him wrestle through this. I think he'll make his way back, So I don't know. I think people just always want to be convinced that like, oh, look at him, he's so confused, you don't know what he's talking about. And I'm not saying I know everything. I know I don't know everything, but like there's just this constant need to make someone out to be crazy because it makes you feel sane. I get why you have faith. I get it. You have your experience. I don't have the experiences that you have. It's that. I get that your brain allows you to think in this way, and then I have my brain and it thinks this way, and that's just how I'm wired. You would even say that's how God made me. You could say it's not a wanting hard enough. Maybe I didn't want it bad enough. I don't know. That's the only way I can think of it, for people to be like, oh, he's just rejecting God, or he wants to make up reasons or whatever. I'm like, well, I don't know. I wanted it, and maybe I didn't want it bad enough. But that's the only thing. I don't know. I felt like I thought I wanted it pretty bad, and then the response is, oh, you just didn't want it bad enough. So I don't know. Yeah, that was a little. To see how people respond is kind of crazy. There's some nice ones in there though, some kind ones. Don't get me wrong. There's some kind ones in there, but a lot of it's just like really negative, man. And it's crazy because I don't think Ezekiel puts out that kind of energy. I do believe that your audience feeds off your energy. And I don't think he puts out that energy, so that's why it's kind of confusing to me. So see, that's because it's an attempt to sound super deep about his decision to leave faith. It really just word vomit that atheists use. In summary, all words are him trying to convince himself. That's my take on it. I could be wrong. Did I not expect it? Again, yeah, you're right. I am foolish for not expecting it. I kind of thought like, okay, if we have a really long conversation, it's with my friend Ezekiel. It'll be non-combative, and they'll see like, oh, he's not one of those angry atheists. He's just like, yo, this is his thoughts. Like I thought that people would see just how like, hey, yo, I have nothing in my hands, nothing under my shirt. Like I come in peace, and it's cool. And I'm even considering faith. Like if you listen to the thing along, I'm like, yo, I kind of say early on, like I consider faith. Like I see the beauty of it, and I can see how when life gets real, it demands that you have something that transcends the natural chaos. So I get why people turn to faith. So I thought that, if I did that, people would, but no. Do you think it's because we as people tend to have a champion or someone who will always have a support, so they sided with Ezekiel? Yeah, that's why I don't want to. There's a lot of people that I wouldn't go on a podcast with because I feel like people are looking for like a mascot to root for. And even when I was a Christian, I had a conversation with my friend Will, who's queer, and people were looking for me to like, oh, you didn't really stick it to him. You didn't really press him hard enough. And I'm like, I was having a conversation with the dude because I think he's a great human being. And at the time I didn't agree with him, but that doesn't mean that I have to like, I'm trying to understand him. I'm not trying to win him over. You're right. I'm not trying to like do some moves and try to see, oh, I got him. Oh, you ain't think about this, did you? See, boom, got you. Like that wasn't my intention. And I think that's what people are looking for. We've gotten so accustomed to people debating online and making a very us versus them. And here I'm foolishly trying to blur that line, but I'm like, hey, we do disagree, but let me show you, like, we're not all that different. If you just let people be human, you start to realize, oh man, like we're really not that different. That's crazy. Like maybe we really are all having a human experience, and I should just be slow to speak and just let people be. Maybe. My thing is, though, do all opinions need to be shared publicly? It could just be me, but I'm very slow to make my comments on a video content in general public. Yeah, part of me gets it. I'm putting myself on a public platform. I realize his channel has 54,000 people, right? He has 100-something thousand people on Instagram. He puts that out there. Like, I'm opening myself up to that energy. So yes, I get that that comes with the territory. You're going to be critiqued. People are going to think about, they're going to have, if you want to do any type of public work, people are going to have going to have strong opinions about you. I'm just trying to like, I think empathy goes a long way, and it's not just an internet thing, because that seeps over into how we really treat people, and so, and I'm not like, it doesn't like, I'm not like hurt by it. It's just kind of like, oh my gosh, like, come on, y'all. Like, let's have this conversation together. Like this, like maybe let's have some more connectedness in the world and start to realize what we have in common. But it's just deeply ingrained, this us versus them, the light versus dark. And that all that language sounds, and I know there's Christians on here right now, but all that language sounds good and fine when you're in the light, when you are considered the ones that be in the light. But when you kind of step back and you realize how that language sounds, man, it's like, man, there's light and there's the dark. I get there's light and darkness to this world. Like I get it. But when we start broad stroking people that way, it's like, just because you don't agree with me, you are darkness. Like, that's just crazy to me. It's just crazy to me. So, I still try to be kind in the comment section. I said, I pretty much stopped following him when his content became worldly. Sad, because I used to be inspired by him. And I said, hey, that's all right, fam. Thanks for rocking with me when you did. Glad I was able to inspire you in some way in your life. And I mean that. So, people are just, it's interesting. So anyways, she said, I consider myself to be on the Christian spectrum. I like that. On the Christian spectrum. I'm open to that. I don't think that, and I mean, this comment, somebody said, I hope he come back for real. It sound like he set on wanting to be questioning God to the point of never deciding does he believe. I'm also not, there's the tension of like, I don't have to, like, man, that's such a big question. Like, I don't know if I live for 90 years, I don't know if that's long enough to like know everything and come to, it really will be an act of faith, but at the same time, I said in this podcast, man, endless curiosity is not it. You got to start living something. And I'm learning that now. If you're in a space of curiosity yourself, like, like at some point, you got to get to living, man. You can't just be curiosity for curiosity's sake. Like, at some point, you got to live out something that you believe. You got to get to living something, living out some creeds. And you'll figure it out along the way, not trying to figure it out and then go on the way. Get on your way, and you'll continue to figure it out. Just keep going, because life is too short to just sit and pontificate all day long. You got to go out there and live something. So anyways, let me go get some Chick-fil-A. It's been real. I've milked this conversation long enough. Thank y'all for rocking with me. As always, I'm getting sleepy. And go check out my new song, Shine on Me. It's been streaming really well right now. And I think it's a great song. So love y'all, man. Y'all be easy. Sending love back to y'all.